Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We hope you had a restful lunch and prayer break. We will now proceed with Session C, which focuses on solutions for sustainability and climate adaptation in health systems. This session highlights the work of experts developing innovative and actionable approaches to strengthen resilience of health systems in a changing climate. To guide this important session, it is my privilege to introduce our session chairs. Ladies and gentlemen, our first chair for this session is Dr. Paul Dalla, Director of Environment, Climate and Sustainability at the Aga Khan Development Network, where he facilitates AKDN's environment and climate objectives. He has a background in social anthropology, law, and international affairs. As Vice Chair of AKDN's Environment and Climate Committee, he plays a crucial role in integrating environment, climate considerations across the AKDN agencies. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dalla. Our co-chair for this session is Professor Safan Wantanak. Professor Wantanak is Director of the University of Health Sciences, Cambodia, where he leads national efforts to strengthen medical education and research capacity. A physician and epidemiologist, he earned his medical degree from UHS in 1995 and both his MSc and PhD in epidemiology from the University of California, Los Angeles. He is also the founder and former head of the School of Public Health at the National Institute of Public Health in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Professor Wantanak has extensive experience in large-scale national health surveys and has co-authored over 120 peer-reviewed publications. His research and leadership have significantly contributed to advancing Cambodia's public health system and guiding national policies on HIV/AIDS, epidemiology, and health system development. Please join me in welcoming Professor Wantanak. Dr. Dalla, Professor Wantanak, the floor is now yours.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Zulfi and Jay, for inviting Professor Wantanak and I to co-chair this session on solutions for sustainability and climate adaptation in health systems. We've had a number of really excellent presentations this morning, many of which highlighted various solutions and adaptive techniques for the challenges posed by climate change. This afternoon's session focuses specifically on solutions and adaptive techniques as they apply to health systems. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Miriam Kugele. Miriam is AKU's Director of Environment and Sustainability and a lecturer in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, AKU. She provides strategic direction for AKU's environmental sustainability initiatives and its journey towards achieving net zero emissions. Miriam led the development of the university's first decarbonization plan and continues to guide its implementation while integrating sustainability across operations, research, and education. With over 15 years of experience in climate change and international development, including work with UNEP, ADB, and IUCN, she combines policy expertise with practical implementation. Please join me in welcoming Miriam.
Thank you for this kind introduction, and thank you very much for IGHD for welcoming me and inviting me to this conference. In particular, since I will be talking from an operational angle. That's the work I lead at AKU in this academic conference. But I think it complements really well some of the more academic, very data-intensive work that you have seen evidence of this morning. So I think that'll be a really great complement. I'll try to keep it short because I know this is also the graveyard shift, so thank you for being here and tuning in. So we're going to talk about a lot of examples from AKU as well as some examples from our sister organization, the Aga Khan Health Services. Both of these are part of the Aga Khan Development Network in the healthcare sector. And we're focusing specifically on the health facilities aspect on climate change. So why do we want to do net zero? That means rapidly decreasing our emissions. It's scientifically defined. Countries do that through the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, but also institutions now do this. So why in the health sector and at health facilities? It's a question I often get asked. And also why in this part of the world? Shouldn't the global north be doing more of this? And we'll get to some of that question at the very end of the presentation. Now, it turns out, and this was research first published in 2022 by The Lancet, that about 5% of global emissions result from the healthcare sector. If that seems like a small number to you, it's actually a bigger proportion than global aviation, which we like to point fingers at, or avoid, hopefully, flying around the world. It is also, if it was a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter in the world. So that just gives you a sense of, there's something that we need to look into. Why? Because of the very energy and material intensive practices, right? So cooling our buildings in this part of the world, providing the services 24/7, having backup for all of this is very, very energy and material intensive. And also, as the picture suggests, a lot of the materials we use in healthcare, of course, are natural resources as well as plastics, right? Petrochemicals in the end of the day. So these are really concerns for us, in particular, since we're meant to actually make people or keep people healthy in the healthcare sector. So there's some kind of dilemma here. And so what I want to talk about is how did we start on the net zero journey is really getting some data to start with, making sense of it, a lot of listening and quite a bit of calculation. So I'm not an economist or similar, but this has been a really interesting journey of making sense of some of the emissions data together with numbers, and I'll show you some of the examples. Then actually planning and investing and prioritizing, as well as monitoring. Like, did it make sense that we installed these solar panels that you were seeing outside and maybe parking under, etc., and then making the next decision to be able to scale it. So the journey started in about 2020 when the Arhan Health Services and AKU came together to develop what is now known as the Arhan Development Network Carbon Management Tool. It is because we would have had to use 5 tools at the time to account for all the emissions that occur in healthcare. It's not just like any other industry or a household or building. And so this was really quite transformative, and because we've used it across about 700 locations, we went to the World Health Organization and had it endorsed by them. Now it's being used by ministries of health, meaning health systems, corporates anywhere that have nothing to do with health, and many others. So we found it quite transformative to provide this freely through other available resources as well to enable others to start this journey. So we got some data. These are just 2 examples from 2 of different locations where we operate health facilities across AKU and AKHS. And we get these kind of pie charts as an example. So where do the emissions come from? Is it energy? Is it waste? We didn't really know this beforehand. And as I say, geographies, locations, and therefore the requirements are quite different. But this is still not good enough, because if you know that a lot of your emissions occur from energy, well, what is consuming that energy? So where should we start to improve maybe the equipment that we use, etc.? So then we did like micro energy audits. These are quite low-key, not done by outsiders, which for a big facility like the one we're in currently, you have to do actually professionally with a lot of engineers and studying data over time. But these are really low-key that we did bottom-up with the staff that we have, where you plug in what is the power load of each of the pieces of equipment that we use, your AC, your fan, your laptops. And it turns out that, of course, in basic versus secondary or especially tertiary facilities, you get a very different pattern, right, of the kind of equipment that is actually consuming your energy. But also that some of the equipment that we use, we didn't really see before. So for example, CCTV and other security equipment in some locations took a lot of energy, and we hadn't paid attention to that, right? It wouldn't have become visible for us if we hadn't plugged it. What also was particularly interesting in this process is actually really working with the engineers and the colleagues on the ground who use this equipment every day, because they were actually observing, oh yeah, that AC is the one that always leaks. Now you want to replace the oldest one over there. That doesn't make sense. So it is really working with the teams on the ground to make sense of all of this data. So when we had this, we went to the next step, which was developing a so-called decarbonization plan, which means prioritizing or looking at what is possible. At the time, 2022, we had over 150 measures that we assessed. Now it's many more. We assessed them for cost, potential cost saving, for example, when you save energy, and of course, carbon savings. And we figured there's really 5 categories of things that we can do. The first is the obvious one, the renewable energy, but you don't want to overinvest that if you have really inefficient equipment and buildings. So the second one is a really important component as well. Practice changes, turns out these often come at low or very low cost or no cost, so they're critically important, and I'll give you some examples later. And then, of course, buildings, right? So can we actually work with the building envelope and improve that? And how do we engage suppliers? Now, I'll go through some of those in detail in a moment. But we also prioritized them, because a lot of the questions we got were, oh, let's invest in EVs, right? Let's change our fleet. But when we actually costed it, turns out that our electric and hybrid vehicles kind of have, in this traffic light shading, your least priority. So if you're an institution that really wants to invest in education and healthcare, because we're not for profit, then you need to prioritize where you need to put your money. So do you put it in solar panels? Do you put in something very basic like air curtains? Pretty not sexy. Nobody wanted it, but air curtains are fantastic, it turns out, right? In terms of value for money. Right? So this really helped us, and of course there's numbers behind all of this clustered, as you can see at the top. They really helped us to prioritize our investment over time. Now next, going forward, I want to tell you a bit more about the initiatives. That's what I've been asked to talk or focus on, and how we kind of monitor towards the impact. Now, I have cherry-picked initiatives because there's too many to really talk about, but these will give you a sense of the diversity of work that was also represented here in the clustered here in the decarbonization plan. So let's start with investments in the realm of energy. As you saw earlier, those really have our biggest emissions impact. So, and I'll take some from very different AKU geographies. In Nairobi, in 2022, we installed a so-called biomass boiler rather than using diesel to make hot water and steam. What you see in the middle is a snapshot of our quarterly emissions accounting data for energy, all energy sources in that case, in Nairobi. And you see a dramatic shift in the data. And so this gives us evidence that in terms of the emissions, this has made a real difference. We can, of course, also track how much less fuel, in this case diesel, we're buying, and the financial savings. Again, we have quantified evidence over this. We've gained some public recognition, such as an award for this as well, and other hospitals in Nairobi are following suit. Now, biomass there is readily available, so it's not a solution that easily translates, for example, to Karachi. On this campus, of course, you've seen, I've mentioned before, we now have 3.8 megawatt of photovoltaic installed. Just for some context, that's a lot, right? That's literally every roof and all of the parking areas. And you can see, of course, as we install that, the output increased over time. But what does it mean? Well, it means we're saving a lot of money. So for those of you who pay electricity bills in Karachi, if you convert those amount of units times 60 rupees per unit, you know how much actually we're saving. And therefore, this will return its investment in about 3 years, right? Because the sun always shines here. It's pretty no-brainer. But of course, there's complexity when you do this dimension, though. It's not the same kind of technical specs that when you install it on a roof. And finally, an example that I wanted to bring in from our hospital in Kabul. It's called FMIC. In this case, it's a water treatment plant. Doesn't save any emissions, but in a place that is incredibly arid, and that over the last 10 years, we've had to increase the depth of the borehole from 100 feet to 800 feet. This is very sensible. And it enables us to still have a small garden where actually patients can, well, increase hopefully their mental health. Difficult to measure, but definitely sensible, right? And again, it's something that we're learning more to scale in different places. What about practice changes that I emphasized earlier? Here's one, again, from this campus in Karachi. Small change, slow change, doesn't happen overnight. So we had to train all of the people who deal with biohazardous biomedical waste, right? That gets incinerated, that's by law, we can't change that. But we trained people to actually put the things that have to be incinerated into the right bin, and things that don't have to be incinerated, like tissue boxes, in the other bin. Believe it or not, this is the difference, right? So cost nothing, but made it really simple to actually see how this would save cost. Again, this depicts emissions, but it takes money to incinerate, right? I call this also local innovation, because we had some nurse then come up with an idea that we should put the red bins, where the biohazardous waste goes, on trolleys, so that only the people who know what belongs in that red bin will actually take it along on their rounds and be able to properly segregate it, right? So that became part of this initiative and its success. Another one from Nairobi here is that we switched off the piped nitrous oxide manifold. So this normally comes through the walls into every operating theater, etc. Clearly, there was something that happened here in 2022 as well, when we switched it off and provided the same nitrous oxide, but in cylinders in the operating rooms. Nobody wanted to believe it, but this is evidence, of course, for that it works. And we're now starting to do exactly the same on this campus, much bigger, much more complex, but it'll happen. So these kind of learnings are really, really helpful. Now, nitrous oxide, when you have that air mask on in the operating room, does leak from the patient to the healthcare providers. So this does have the implication of keeping the healthcare providers healthier over time. Of course, the cost reduction, and it's now a global best practice. Most hospitals in the global north are now decommissioning this. So we're really well aligned. This might surprise, but we're tracking how much meat we are buying and serving in our cafeterias. Why meat, you may ask? Well, it is probably around 35% of, responsible for about 35% of global emissions due to land use change, beef, etc., etc. I won't go into detail, but we're tracking that, right? And so by offering planet-friendly meals, more often vegetarian, we can save money, we can save emissions, and we can have this multiplier effect when we communicate to our staff, to our students, and they can translate this into their own homes. Turns out also meat may not be the healthiest thing for your body, so there's that element too. But I won't go into that detail now. So wanted to also just mention that for our facilities, it was really important to focus on a lot of these practice changes because the energy and renewable energy kind of part really costs money to invest. Yes, it has a return on investment, but while you wait for the investment, maybe for some philanthropists or for your budget to be approved, there's a lot of this that can really be done, and it's very transformative for the people involved. Briefly, I wanted to mention some procurement-related initiatives. What we have at AKDN level, in fact, is so-called supplier alignment targets. So it really tracks how much we, in our institutions, spend with suppliers who themselves have net zero targets, or who themselves are starting greenhouse gas accounting and therefore have the ability to move. So we're tracking this. Some numbers are moving over time, some less quickly, but we're then working with suppliers and enabling them to become part of this shift. Because it also turns out when you start measuring your emissions, you see the hot spots and want to do something about it. Because you also see how much things cost, right? All the energy you put in your car, all the fuel, well, it costs you something, so you want to reduce it. And that same goes for healthcare facilities. And also procurement related, but something that happens in-house, is the decisions about what kind of equipment we use, if we have single-use or reusable types, and also calculating what Jeff was referring to earlier, the total cost of ownership, right? So not how much does it cost today to, for example, buy a new chiller, a big AC, but how much does it cost to operate it for the 25 years that we will be using it? And then different models really have a different calculation or an end result associated. So those are decisions we can make ourselves. Just wanted to mention really quickly on the reuse part. So a lot of things that we use in healthcare have this little logo that you see at the bottom right, and it says 2. You're not allowed to use it twice in this case, right? It's single use. And some of it, let's say even, for example, scissors and similar stuff, you can super well sterilize, etc., but it's designated as single use. So increasingly over the last few years, there's been a movement amongst healthcare providers in the health sector to work with the manufacturers and say, please designate this differently so we can actually reuse it safely and legally, et cetera, right? Because these materials are incredibly valuable. Because we're sitting on this beautiful Stadium Road campus, and because it's also the theme of this conference, I very briefly want to mention buildings. So you will have seen outside things like these wind corridors or jali patterns on the wall that actually reduce the space on the inside of the wall, therefore it compresses the air and cools the other side of the wall, or this very particular weeping plaster that we have on this campus. This weeping plaster, the idea of it is that the sun casts a little shadow on the actual wall, and therefore the wall absorbs less of the heat. The design team has done some studies on this to compare the wall with and without the weeping plaster, and has found an evidence of about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius different. Doesn't sound like a lot, but these things really, really add up, and it makes a significant difference in terms of energy use as well as comfort of the users. Of course, these also emphasize local materials, and I want to mention this one, reduce the urban heat island, since again Jeff was mentioning it this morning. Last year I had my students from the Faculty of Arts and Sciences do transects across the city when we were studying urban heat islands, and most of them went across this campus. And just the difference between Stadium Road on this campus and the very dense buildings on the other side, they all measured differences between 3 and 7 degrees Celsius. That has to do with the greenery on this campus, the wind corridors, the evaporation, et cetera, right? So this wasn't scientific evidence, it was just students doing a bit of research with simple thermometers, but you can kind of feel it when you're on the road or on the campus yourself, right? And finally, we're installing some window film really to help the buildings do the things that have actually been designed here since the very beginning of this campus, right? So there were really smart architects back in the day doing a lot of this, right? Now, those were some of the examples. We are working very closely with the ATTACH, the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health. It's a WHO-hosted body that came out of COP26, when health actually kind of was mentioned for the first time in global climate negotiations, believe it or not. So just these two were published last week, 10 days ago now at COP, which bring in some of the examples from our Global South kind of experience on exactly these subject matters. Now, just wanted to mention really briefly with respect to the other implications that some of our work at AKU and AKHS has, and I'm going to call it green jobs. Just 2 days ago, I was asked, why are you not an engineer? Shouldn't you be an engineer? Shouldn't there be an engineer on your team? Because this is the assumption of what we need when we do net zero in healthcare. Turns out, we need everyone and more. So again, I'm lucky to present to you here, but this is actually the work that I've presented of hundreds of colleagues across our campuses from the most diverse kind of areas you can think of, right, across our campuses. And they all have a role to play. So I just really wanted to re-emphasize whatever institution might be inspired, might be working for and may be inspired, please think of all these roles as relevant and many, many more, right? We all have a role to play here. Now, just to summarize, when I was originally given the title for this conference talk today, it read Initiatives at AKDN Towards Net Zero Status, which was a very good prompt, but I didn't take it. It's also a controversial prompt. Why didn't I take it? Because actually net zero is a bit tricky if anybody in this world, whether it's a country, a city, an institution, a healthcare provider, a bank, anybody can achieve. It is very much a North Star. Scientists have defined what it means, how much the leftover carbon budget is, but the emphasis really must be on the urgent action to decarbonize, partially also because it has all these benefits for, that we can call co-benefits for mitigation, right? Of course, one of the challenges is that we have to act now but think long-term, and that's not something we're particularly good at as human beings and as institutions as well, right? But really, the business case remains really, really strong, and I think there's a lot of evidence from across sectors on this now. Of course, there's a public health co-benefit, right? So just think about, these publications about how many people die from air pollution every year, etc., right? Or from heat, as we heard as well this morning. And I find this one really important. As medical practitioners who take an oath, or medical practitioners take an oath to do no harm. And it really relates to, treating patients. But when we take the concept of planetary health, which now is really popular, then it should really be about do no harm to the planet as well, right? So I think this shift of thinking might be quite important. Now, I mentioned earlier why in high-income countries or low-income countries, so just talk this really quick graph. In high-income countries, we have to reduce the emissions per patient, right, or per square meter of hospitals. The circle on the outside, or the red circle, is the emissions, right? Whereas in low-income countries, actually we're doing, of course, really well. Emissions are much lower, but that is actually because we haven't reached universal health care. So the challenge here is a very different one. How do we increase healthcare access, healthcare facilities, while not making this whole problem worse? Right? How do we build and operate green? right? So very different challenges, but again, everybody needs to take some action. So just want to say in summary, again, next time you see some solar panels, please do celebrate them for their clean energy and noise reduction and all of those wonderful things. But in the end of the day, for healthcare facilities, it's a question of risk management, building resilience to an uncertain future, and really, it's about keeping people healthy. Thank you.
Thanks, Miriam. I'd like to invite a question or two from the audience for Miriam. Up there.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to see that AKU is doing a great job in terms of the green energy. I have a little bit vice versa question, if you don't mind. Yes, we are working on green energy, but I belong to Gezer Gilgit-Baltistan. The problem there is there's too much cold. And in winter, we have to take like 3-4 blankets. Is there any solution for it? Because there's no solar energy there, because the sunlight is very less. And also, there is no power in winters, like very less power. So how can we make the houses more like, too much warm in the winters, just like there should be a central heating system the way it is in the West. So could you please give any solution for that?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And of course, implied in that is that every location is really specific, right? And the calculations that we've done and showed for AKU, AKHS are going to be very different in other facilities and other places. But even in cold places, maybe where you have less sunlight, solar is still a very worthwhile option, especially in places where the grid is as unstable as it is in northern Pakistan. Insulation is the other one that really pays off, right? And as, for example, Dr. J talked about this morning, it doesn't have to be very expensive, right? Working with local materials, there's different ones in the north, can be really, really successful at keeping some of the heat in rather than out, right? But works in the same way. Ventilation is another one to look at, which has to be reduced, in fact, in the winter rather than increased. But again, building structures can make a big difference on that. There's other things that I could mention, but it's also worthwhile looking at some of this, of the evidence online. We don't have a facility up north that is relevant in this case. Our experience in terms of health facilities there is much more limited.
Thank you, Miriam, for the presentation. This is all good, and I've seen most of it a lot. The only question that I have is in terms of how close we are to the net zero, because all these smaller interventions are great, and it's good to see that they're working, but I'm sure that each year you sit and look at altogether how close or far are we from the net zero. So I'd like to understand in the past few years that you've worked, where are we at the moment, and then by 2030, where are we going to be?
Sure. So it's a question I get every time, and I guess there's no perfect answer to it, but the challenge is that although we're doing all these great initiatives, across AKU, our emissions have actually stabilized rather than gone down. But there's very good reasons, and we understand them rather than just ignore the fact that the emissions are not drastically going down. So one of them is we keep adding new buildings. Right? We keep adding new services. We keep expanding our services, whether it's in education or healthcare. That's that problem I addressed in the end, right? How do we do that, especially in an environment like here where you just have to cool, right? People expect a cool environment. So it's a real challenge. The other one is climate change itself. So if you live in Karachi, you know that the summer starts earlier, the nights are hotter, the heat periods are longer. There's good evidence on it. That also means we have to cool more, and so our energy is going up, and other factors related to it. So we track all of this, both the down, which is our good work, and the up, which is the problems and the context, right? So some of the numbers then can be looked at in terms of intensity, and if you look at it in terms of intensity, we're probably doing much better, right? So intensity per square meter, per patient, per student, by whatever metric that is relevant for us to measure, right? And there's many different ones that can be applied. Now, the implication of the question is, will we get there by 2030? Let's find out, right? But again, it's the North Star, right? So we have to keep doing what we do and believe that it's possible. Probably not a satisfactory answer, but that's where we're at.
Thank you. Thank you for such an inspiring work and the impressive progress that you have made. Two questions that come to my mind. Can you compare your progress in different categories, maybe, if it's with some other benchmark, some other university, some other campus that's also traversing on a similar journey?
Right.
Instead of just comparing with your own starting point, and that's one. And second, between now and 2030, the amount of emissions that you emit, do you have an offsetting program on your horizon? Thank you.
Thank you. Both really important questions. So the first one, I kind of nearly have to defer. So the Lancet Commission for Sustainable Healthcare is in the process of developing KPIs, key performance indicators, on exactly that, right? What are some of the benchmarks we can measure for healthcare? Those don't exist yet, so we're really looking forward to those coming about. But it's really difficult to compare, a tertiary care hospital in Karachi to a primary care in rural Sindh, or a tertiary care in Karachi to a tertiary care in the US, right? What's the basis of comparing any of that? It's actually really tricky. Now, also for the climate, in the end of the day, it really doesn't care about benchmarks. It cares about each ton of emissions. And so, yes, we are comparing with ourselves, right? And the second question was in relation to offsetting, right? So at AKDN, and maybe Paul could elaborate on this as well, but we're looking first and foremost at insetting, so in-house offsetting. Across the network, we have huge portions of land, and many of them have done a lot of afforestation as well as improved soil management, etc. So nature-based solutions over time, and we're looking to expand all of that on the owned land. Then there's insetting we can do on community land, right, where we get a portion of those carbon benefits over time when the agreements are done right, etc. All of this is completely being developed and expedited, actually, over the last year and a half or so. And so we should have much more data on this to share by mid-next year in terms of AKU's data across the network. It'll probably be about a similar time frame. And then we'll have to make a network-wide decision on what that means for external carbon credits or EACs or whatever it may be.
I can try to add a little bit to that.
Thank you.
So as I think most people here know, AKU is part of the broader Abakan Development Network. The net zero goal is a AKDN-wide goal. Parts of the system everyone has to decarbonize. That is clear. But net zero obviously doesn't mean absolute zero. So the only way we can be absolute zero is to just close our operations, which is not something that anyone wants to do. So we will have residual emissions, for sure. A lot of residual emissions, no matter what. I mean, as Miriam said, AKU's emissions are not really going down. They're stabilizing. Some parts of the system, their emissions have gone down quite substantially. And nevertheless, there will still be residual emissions, probably something like 40% from baseline. Baseline being 2019 is the ideal baseline here. So what to do about the residual emissions? So we don't want to buy carbon credits on the market. We don't want to use funds that could otherwise be spent on poverty alleviation or healthcare to buy carbon credits. But what we can do is, because we are a very large and complex organization, we have the ability to, as Miriam said, inset some of those emissions through really two ways. One is nature-based solutions, tree planting, mangrove planting, and the carbon that can be sequestered from those nature-based solutions. And the other is renewable energy. So parts of the organization are substantial producers of renewable energy. So, and this is where AKU, in a way, its net zero goal benefits from being part of this wider development network. So even if AKU itself does not become quote unquote net zero, and even the definition of net zero is an evolving thing. Every time there's a COP, I was just in Brazil, the definition is changed slightly as to what constitutes net zero, how is it calculated, and so another challenge for us is also just to keep pace with those evolving definitions. But just to finish on this point, we've decided to create an internal carbon market, an AKDN internal carbon market. Parts of the system, for example, Abakan Foundation is substantial tree planter. I think AKF planted 8 million trees last year. And so we are now endeavoring to measure the carbon that could be sequestered from those trees. And then also the renewable energy piece, ACFED, Industrial Promotion Services, is a major producer of renewable energy in Uganda and Tajikistan. And so in this internal carbon market, we will have our emissions, which we will try to reduce as much as possible. And then the residual emissions we will try to inset or offset through internal mechanisms such as tree planting and renewable energy. I hope that clarifies things a little bit. Again, it's yeah. I mean, this is an ambitious goal. We are doing our best to achieve it, but you know, it is not an easy, by any means easy endeavor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, yeah, we should round of applause for Miriam.
Thank you. So now we move on to the second presentation. The title is Climate Adaptive Design, Indigenous Material and Built Environment Solution. This presentation is co-presented by two presenters. I would like to introduce the first presenter, architect Lala Rukmati. Lala Rukmati is an architect, healthcare planner and designer, development expert and gender specialist, serving as an associate faculty member and senior project manager at the Institute for Global Health and Development at Aga Khan University. She brings extensive international experience in sustainable development, climate resilience, and gender equity. Educated in Pakistan and the United States, she is currently based in the United States, where she has over 35 years of experience working for large multidisciplinary healthcare design firm. At IGHD, she has been actively engaged for over a year, co-mentoring and working with postdoctoral fellow Humara Nazir to develop strategy for climate resilient public healthcare facility in Sindh, Matshari district. Her technical expertise support the design and upgrading of health infrastructure focusing on inclusive, participatory and climate adaptive indigenous solution for Pakistan evolving health system, with a special focus on healthcare facility in rural underdeveloped area. Please join me to welcome architect Lala Rukmati. I also would like to introduce her co-presenter, Humara Nazir. Humara Nazir is a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute for Global Health and Development, Aga Khan University, with a strong background in architecture, sustainable development, and community infrastructure. Prior to joining IGHD, she served as an assistant professor at Sai University of Engineering and Technology, where she has been teaching since 2016. Her research explored the growth of neighborhood and community, focusing on sustainability, infrastructure, and the built environment. With over 26 publications in national and international journals and multiple accolades, including the Best Teacher Award and Best Mentor Award, Humaira is deeply committed to improving living conditions and fostering climate resilient urban development. She also contributes to rural development projects through her work with the Rural Development Foundation in Sindh, bringing a holistic community-centered approach to her work at IGHD. Please join me to welcome Humara Nazir. So now the floor is yours.
Giving us this opportunity for this important research and for being our mentors for the last 1 year while we were working through this project. So this research project is a case study. It's an evaluation of climate resilience within a rural district health system of Matiari, Sindh, and then looking at opportunities for change. So as an introduction, since yesterday, we've all been talking about climate change, so we're all pretty familiar with it. Now, Pakistan is not the culprit here. Pakistan is basically facing the challenges, the brunt of what climate change has caused. So at this point, what we have to do is come up with strategies that will help bolster our own infrastructure to prepare and mitigate and adapt to the impact of climate change. A recent report from WHO said that these were the things that they talked about regarding the healthcare infrastructure was rise in natural disasters have had severe impact on human health and health infrastructure. And climate change has an urgent investment in resilient healthcare infrastructure and services are needed, as well as regional adaptation and strategies to protect and promote the well-being of LMICs. So the main thing here is focus on regional adaptation. So the objectives of this study, there are three main objectives of this study. One, to identify climate threats of existing rural healthcare infrastructure. Secondly, to analyze and explore mitigation and adaptation strategies. And third, to propose sustainable interventions to improve the resilience of the healthcare infrastructure. The fourth thing here that you see is identify pilot facilities to implement these interventions and to assess their effectiveness. This was not part of the study. This is going to be coming after. This is the outcome of this research project. So a little bit about the district of Matiari. So Matiari was picked because it is an average district representing the impact of climate change in Sindh province. Matiari itself has 3 sub-districts in it. Matiari itself, Hala, Saidabad. The population of Matiari is 850,000 people, approximately. Within the Matiari district, the public and private healthcare facilities, there are about 220 facilities that serve the district. So in our study, we picked 12 facilities. And so we picked, out of their 20 basic healthcare units, we picked 5. We visited pretty much all of them. We picked 5 based on which were working the best, which were not in that good of a condition. And so 5 were picked based on their conditions. 4 were rural healthcare centers. We picked all of them. 3 were secondary healthcare facilities, and we picked all of those. What we did not pick were dispensaries, which were basically single room facilities, or any of the facilities that were basically serving one type of disease or just a different, one type of a disease or, what, sorry? Yeah. So our study methodology. On our study methodology, it was basically, it took us about a year to do this. It started off, it was multifaceted. We took permission, it started off with taking permission from our AKU Ethical Review Committee. Then we had to go through and to get permission from the district healthcare officer in Matiari. Then the study, we went through and did a qualitative data review, then a quantitative data review. For the qualitative data review, we picked the WHO guideline as a tool to guide us through this whole process. We picked WHO guideline because it is designed for low and middle income countries. It has been used for some of the countries that we used as an example. So after we used that tool, we ended up with selecting the facilities that was part of the study. We prepared for pre-site investigation, which included preparing staff in the field to go and prepare for data collection, followed by data collection in the field. We took that data and did computer modeling for that data. Then we did the analysis of the data collected, followed by using the same WHO tools to look at and evaluate that data and assess the findings. And based on those findings, we went in and proposed some interventions and recommendations. So a little bit about the guiding tool from WHO. In 2020, WHO devised or came up with this guideline, which is a set of 2 documents. One is a guideline, the other is a complementary document, which is a checklist. So the guideline has 4 domains in it, which evaluates a facility based on the healthcare workforce, water, sanitation, healthcare, waste, energy, infrastructure, technologies, and products. And then there's a complementary document of checklists, which is based on, it has multiple documents in it for specific hazards, which is environmental hazards, which includes floods and storms and seawater rise and cold waves, as you can see here. We particularly specifically focused on floods and heat waves as they were more applicable to Pakistan. Taking those 2 documents, we created a document that was specific to Matiari, and we created that. Basically, we took the checklist. How we created that for Matiari was that we had to send that ahead of time to the facilities, and we had to translate that in Sindhi so that the facility, it could be shared with the doctors, it could be shared with the patients, and they could answer the questions before we would show up on the site, and we could have the answers ahead of time so we could verify those answers. At the same time, we had the questionnaire that we had to modify for the facility so it was applicable to rural Sindh. So those two documents together gave us a good idea of what those facilities were, each facility was like, and then that helped us when we went in the field to assess them in terms of what their condition was like and what was the perception of the users of that facility. And then Humaira is going to go into each one of those and talk to you about the...
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. As Lala Rukh has already discussed about the WHO checklist and about the main domains, now let's see how we use these domains for collecting our data. I'm just giving you an overview. We have 4 domains: healthcare workforce, WASH, energy, infrastructure, quality, and products. So our first domain is healthcare workforce, and under this domain we have 3 indicators which we use to assess the healthcare facilities. Number 1 is human resources, communication and awareness raising, and then capacity development. So our audit shows significant variation among the facilities, and we found that among BHUs, BHU Khandu and BHU Fakir Nohothani, that is known as FNT, that were performing better than the other facilities due to their 24/7 maternity services. They had good local staff, as well as they have functional zonings that support their operation in case of any disaster. Similarly, among RHCs, RHC Khyber and RHC Hala all were performing better than the other facilities because of the same above mentioned characteristics. But unfortunately, RSC is not performing good in terms of capacity development. BHUs are giving communication and awareness raising session to the local community to make them aware about the climate change, its impact on their health, as well as mitigation strategies. They are also offering different kind of capacity development program to their staff after 3 months. But RHC is lacking all these things. Similarly, among secondary facilities, DHQ Metiari unfortunately is not performing well in terms of capacity development as well as in terms of human resources because of their overcrowding. So the second domain is a wash, and under this we had 3 indicators, that is risk management, health and safety regulation, and then monitoring and assessment. We found that all healthcare facilities are actually relied on groundwater through motorized pump, and there is no rainwater harvesting as well as water reuse system. And for drinking purposes, water coolers are provided, but as you can see in the pictures of few facilities, but you can also see the condition of those water coolers. These are the secondary facilities that are actually catering a lot of population, but maintenance as well as their treatment are very weak. Similarly, sanitation and waste management remain below WHO standard in all these facilities, and open pit burning is very common. As you can see in the pictures, that is one of the main environmental problem. Monitoring and maintenance of hygiene were irregular across all these facilities, and our observation and patient feedback as well as doctor feedback also indicated that washrooms were not in good condition, and some of the people are saying that we are not using these facilities, these washrooms. We will show you those conditions in the next slides. Our third domain is energy, and we use the same indicators as we have already used in the wash domain. Results shows that all these healthcare facilities are using solar systems, but limited battery storage actually reduce their resilience due to long power outages. Similarly, we also found that in many facilities, monitoring and of solar system performance was inconsistent, and weak tracking of battery storage level and maintenance schedule also contribute to reduce their resilience during long power outages, particularly in those facilities with older systems. So our fourth domain is infrastructure, technology, and product. And there are 3 indicators for this: adaptation of current systems and infrastructure, promotion of new systems and technologies, and sustainability of healthcare facilities operation. So for this purpose, architectural and environmental documentation were done, precise building measurements were taken, and then we were converted them into floor plans as well as spatial drawings to see how rooms, corridors, and courtyards are arranged and how openings are allowed for cross ventilation, natural lighting. This is an example of one of the facility that is performing better in RHCs. So this is RHC Khyber. This is their floor plans. As you can see in the floor plans, we found that the rooms have proper windows on both the walls facing the outside as well as the walls facing the corridors, and corridor itself are provided with the openings with proper jalis that not only allow cross ventilation, but it also help in enhancing the indoor environmental quality by promoting natural airflow and reducing heat gain as well. Though this is not a kind of something new, but its strategic implementation in the healthcare facilities support climate resilient design. These are some of the pictures of this facility. And then to check how buildings perform in different kind of environmental conditions, we also perform solar and as well as wind analysis. With the help of this simulation, we actually understand what kind of intervention we can propose for different kind of facades as well as for the outdoor area. So we did solar analysis. Solar analysis helped us to understand which building facade is more exposed to the heat and which area actually need some kind of intervention. So our analysis indicated that south-facing wall is more exposed to the sun, but in case of RHC Khyber, that is actually given here, we found that south-facing facade of actually the male are provided the corridors that are actually placed after a thought is actually act as a buffer against the heat. Similarly, we also found that the walls that are at the west side are exposed to the morning sun, but they are also provided with a proper shading, so that it's also a kind of thing that is that they have adopted in a good way. But in all these facilities, we found that the roof is fully exposed to the sun, so there is a need to treat the roof, because without treatment, it let the heat in and create an environment that is not good for the patient as well as for the user. So we also performed wind analysis. Wind analysis was done to check the exposure of prevailing wind on the all sides of the buildings, wind speed impact, as well as cross ventilation potential. So we found that the north and east spaces of the buildings show minimal wind activity and wind are calm. So there is a need to incorporate some kind of modern technology, so that maybe a kind of hybrid ventilation system, so that these areas remain cool during when the wind is not when the wind is not cool at the calm period, and position of outdoor seating areas are suitable for southwest breeze. So this is another example of the facility that is actually not a good facility. It's very weak in terms of its infrastructure, as well as maintenance, natural light, and some other kind of features, as you can see in the pictures as well. And this is one of the facilities that was most affected by the flood 2022. You can see how the interior is dim. They have windows, but they have to keep those windows closed all the time, because windows are without shades, as well as without a kind of jalis. So insect is also a big issue. So we did the same solar and wind analysis for this facility, and its result is quite similar with the previous one, because all of them are located in the same climatic conditions. So we also found that south and east facades are more exposed to the sun, and they actually need deep shade due to not having proper kind of buffer against the solar light. Similarly, wind analysis is also giving some kind of results, and this facility also indicated that if we place some kind of outdoor seating and courtyard area towards southwest side, which help us not only to provide some kind of seating space for the people to sit outside, but it's also beneficial from southwest side. So these are some kind of, I'm not going to discuss about these in details, because these are some kind of facilities. We have done the same process as well as analytic approach for the rest of the 10 facilities. So overall, our analysis indicated that among all these facilities, if we see which one is performing better, if we consider 12 facilities, so RHC, Hala, old is performing better. But in terms of infrastructure, because it's also a new facility as well as maintenance, in terms of maintenance, infrastructure, and some other features, but we also found that wash is only the domain which is very weak across all these facilities, and there is a need to work hard to improve this domain. Similarly, for the third indicator of our fourth domain, to understand how buildings perform in case of any disaster and how they were sustainable in case of any disaster, we took a 2022 flood as an example to see. And here you can see we use GIS map to check the flood water spread before and after flood 2022. And the blue color is showing the water spread after flood 2022, and the purple is representing the natural river water. So here you can see the facilities which are in red color indicated that these facilities were more exposed to the flood water, and they actually face major services disruption during flood. And the remaining facilities were also exposed to the flood, but at moderate level and partial. They actually experienced partial waterlogging and remain functional at some extent. So after those four indicators, we also see that how facility is resilient against different climatic conditions. So we have checked some kind of building elements to see, like floor, like plinth level, as well as floor and building construction techniques, their materials, as well as some other techniques. So we found that our assessment says that all buildings are built by RCC roof, but low plinth actually exposed all of these facilities to the flood. These materials, they are using actually bricks as well as RCC, and these material actually providing them stability, but also not providing them a comfortable environment without any treatment or wall insulation as well. So now our second tool was survey questionnaire. We have conducted a questionnaire for doctors, inpatient and outpatient, and our sample size was 184. So we have a lot of data, but we are just giving you some kind of snapshot of those questions that were more relevant to our domain. Our results indicated that 60% patient reported that they didn't visit the healthcare facility during the flood, and 20% maintained that during flood they visited the facility, but unavailability of doctors as well as medicine was the great hindrance. And they were happy that facilities are equipped with solar systems, but battery backup showed better service continuity. It was actually their suggestion. 80% doctors indicated that inadequate waste management is a big issue, while same proportion of patients noted the presence of color-coded bin, but they didn't know which kind of waste will be thrown in which kind of dustbin. Around 70% of the patient indicated that clean water is available, but 30% were saying we didn't find any kind of clean water. 50% indicated limited outdoor waiting areas, and we also observed that during our visit we have found many people sitting outside on roads as well as on grounds, and so this is one of the major issue which we found there. As well as maintenance delay is also a big issue as indicated by the doctor. So these are the results of our checklist as well as surveys, and we grade all these facilities on the basis of WHO checklist metrics. So these are the results. Here you can see some facilities are performing better in different domains and some are not performing. I am not going to discuss these results here. I have another slide in which I have graphically presented these results, so we will discuss this here. These are the charts which shows that which PHU and which RSC and which secondary facility is performing better in which of domains. So here you can see, as we have already discussed, that among BHUs, BHU Khyber and BHU Khandu is performing better. However, wash domain in all these facilities you can see is at a low level. Similarly, RHCs, RHC Hala, Old and Khyber is performing better. But in RHCs, if we compare RHC Hala with RHC Khyber, then RHC Hala is better than RHC Khyber. Similarly, among our secondary facilities, THQ Saidabad is performing better than the other facilities. So now it's intervention part. I request Lala to.
Sure. So based on all the findings of the results, throughout this process, after talking to people, these are the ones that we came up with that consistently came in our surveys of things that could be improved. Raising the plinth level was something that came up. Obviously, you cannot do that to existing buildings. So anything new that comes up, raising the floor plinth level would definitely help with mitigating floods in the future. Increasing solar capacity for each of the facilities, better cross ventilation, sealing, drainage systems, setting up a cleaning plan for the facility, solar reflective paints, shading fenestrations, windows, outdoor shaded areas. Is as far as the building goes, those were the key points that we found out. Landscaping would make a big difference to the facility in terms of how the outside of the building, shading the facility as well as how the grounds of the buildings are used. Basically, grading the drainage outside the building helps the water from coming into the facility, also providing clean water, not just for drinking, but also for irrigation, shading for landscape, and planting and harvesting native plants. The biggest thing is how you engage the local community, incentivize them, and educate them in taking care of making them part of the process of how to maintain the facilities, having them become part of the process, part of how to take care of the facilities and essentially have skin in the game. For workforce operations, um, we, one of the things we found out was that we definitely needed resilience training. We needed reliable staff housing close to these healthcare facilities. We definitely needed a maintenance protocol, and then we needed equity and inclusion, which is including women as part of the decision-making process. Some of the things that came up, okay. Some of the other ideas that came up was overcrowding of waiting areas. And part of it is part of the planning of the facilities when we have too many people crowding the waiting rooms. So our idea was to pull the people out by providing outdoor shaded areas for people to wait in. Those could be multi-purpose spaces that after hours could be used as community gathering spaces or play areas for children. This is just examples of the same.
We are just wrapping up.
Wrapping up here. Improving wash systems is a big thing. This requires, even if you have facilities, one, they're not adequately designed, or they're not the genders are not, they're not adequately segregated for genders. We needed basically a behavior change when it comes to training and educating staff for keeping them clean. Same for the wash. Yes, we're moving on. These are some examples we talked about giving some opportunities for shading the outside spaces, extending the waiting area. What happened here? How do I get to? Did I? There you go. So in conclusion, basically what we found, the mixed resilience is what we were, what we looked at was, what we found out was there was mixed resilience. We needed, all facilities were using solar systems, but we needed more capacity. Wash was a big weakness in all facilities. Low plinth levels was seen in all facilities. We needed ventilation and shading systems was an issue, and resilience and facilities were not climate ready. Next. We did do a preliminary cost analysis of what we could do to improve the facilities, and that's just a preliminary cost number that we came up with after talking to some of the contractors. And thank you for our team that helped us through this research in the field.
Thank you very much. So now we open the floor for one question, if you have one. So, yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Indeed, here, madam. Indeed, it was a very good session. I want to ask about the question related to the plinth level. You mentioned for climate resilient structures, we have to raise the height of the plinth. But if when we talk about the hospitals or health structures of Pakistan, means we do not have enough resources to build the new ones. So did you consider anything related to the diversion of the water path, especially in floods? Means there could be a way that causeways or water causeway can be cleared and encroachment may be cleared, and water may find its path or diversion, and it may not reach the health structure. Thank you.
We did look at it to basically look at how you do swales around the site of the building so the water can move away from the building. But ultimately, if you have so much water that it floods, it has to go somewhere. when you're talking about water, like 2022 floods, it's not something that can be controlled by, just moving water away by small swales. It does require, you can't do anything about existing, but anything new, it is advised that the floor be raised.
So thank you very much. Please join me to thank the two presenters.
It's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Rumi Chinara. Dr. Rumi is an associate professor of biostatistics and computer science at New York University, School of Engineering and School of Global Public Health, where she also serves as the director of the Center for Health Data Science. Her research integrates computational, statistical, and ethical approaches to improve population-level public health, with a focus on machine learning, social computing, and public health. Her lab develops data-driven methods across natural language processing, spatio-temporal analysis, and data mining. A recipient of numerous honors, including the NSF Career Award and the Gates Foundation Grand Challenges Award, Dr. Chinara is a global leader in the use of data science for equitable public health advancement. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chinara.
Thank you so much for the introduction. If I may, could I get everybody to just stand up for a second? All right. Okay, good. Oh, no problem. I'm a public health person. So, we've been so many, and great, yeah, please, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So appreciative to be a part of this conversation, all of these critical talks. Thank you so much to Drs. Butta and Dr. Das for the invitation. I'd like to start by just telling you a little bit about where I'm coming from. So I run a center at NYU that acts as a bridge across these two areas, engineering and computing, as well as public health. And so in doing this, not only are we acting as a bridge to bring together these conversations, but I think one of the most important solutions we have for climate change is our young people. And I'm very excited and energized every day to be working with them. And I feel this topic is very energizing for them as well. So hope you share in that delight that we'll see through this area. So our goal is to think about data and all of the new technologies, machine learning, AI, not just in the hospital setting, but to help us understand and action on all of those determinants of health, environmental, social factors, and to find that data, to bring that data into our picture. And many times, as I'll discuss, these are not kind of the typical things we consider as data. So here I've listed some of those types of data and information that we use. And as I'll start off, we talk a lot about these things based on the principles of health equity. Ultimately, we're interested in quality of life. And so being a public health person and interested in human health, there's no way we can stay away from that intertwined nature of climate and public health as well, human and planetary health. So what's happening today, health in the age of AI? And I put a couple of things here on purpose together that probably you'd never really see together. We have on the left a lot of energy, a lot of power, a lot of wealth being consolidated in some of the technology companies. I'm sure we're all aware about how that happens. These folks are very interested in data and AI, and so we see a lot of forces that kind of start infusing that into the many parts of our lives, including our health and our health care. Yeah, like I said, a lot of the forces that we see driving the ways we look at health today come from this kind of consolidation. On the right-hand side, I took a figure from a great book, many might have seen it from over a decade now ago, about why this question of equity and inequity, as we all know, just putting some numbers to it. They speak at length about this idea of putting data and numbers to this question and why that's important. But I'll just show you here a few figures. On the x-axis here, we have national income per person. And on the y-axis is life expectancy. So a couple of things to notice, as we all see. Of course, there is some increase here because we know everyone's basic needs need to get satisfied in order to improve that part, the health expectancy. But there's also this plateau. So beyond a certain level of this income, we don't see any corresponding increase in life expectancy. Where is Pakistan in this list? I think it's probably somewhere in here, right? But that's one piece of the picture. Another figure I like to pull out from this same book is not looking at life expectancy, but now happiness. And that's measured through a standardized survey. And here we have percent of very happy, sorry about that, and quite happy. Here's Pakistan for your information. Again, we see, according to versus the national income per person, we have an increase, and then we have a plateau. Okay? Interestingly, yeah, we're up here. Oh, who was on the top? You mean up here? Tanzania, Indonesia, okay. All right, so we know this concept of health equity. It's defined by many groups. This is from the WHO. And, you know, there's been much research about this. This is nothing new, that health follows this kind of gradient across socioeconomic position. And there's a lot of determinants of health that are through the life course and physical and social environments. Now, how is this all coming to connect to the data picture? Here, I'm bringing us there. I particularly wanted to share some background on some of the research on interventions in science. So this is actually common if you look through economic literature, informatics literature, many different areas. We have found that some kind of interventions actually widen these inequities, right? We've showed that these inequities are not just unjust, but they don't help with society at large. And one example, in the US, we know about media campaigns for smoking cessation. So tobacco smoking has gone quite down over the last several decades. But if you look in certain socioeconomic groups, that unfortunately has not decreased, and in some cases actually increased. And a lot of the work to bring that down was through kind of encouraging people to basically quit for smoking cessation. This required a lot of ability to do that, to focus energy on quitting versus some of that energy that's needed to maintain food security, income security. And so folks had to be at that kind of position in order to engage in that behavioral cessation. And in general, interventions that widen inequities tend to focus on individual level approaches. And of course, inequality at a societal level is harmful across the population as a whole. So here's another graph not looking at income per person, but income inequality. And where that's higher, you see this very clear inverse relationship with, in this case, child well-being. And it's harmful not just in terms of health outcomes, but this has been studied widely in terms of innovation, social cohesion, many, many aspects of life. So again, you'll be wondering, where is this talk going in terms of data? Well, when you think about the data question, and here we have a full socio-ecological perspective on health. We have all the individual factors that will relate to our health, will help conform it, interpersonal aspects, organizational, community, these concentric circles. Oftentimes, and of course, as we just talked about, we need to think upstream here in order to avoid that widening of inequities. Data tends to center around here. We often capture data, it's focused mostly on the individual level. It tends to atomize or be focused around here. And we know that we want to be thinking up here when we think about any kind of interventions, and especially the data question. So, of course, all of these forces we've been talking about will shape what we even consider as data, what is measured, what is missing, and who is represented in that data. And as we think about machine learning and AI technologies, these are learning patterns from data. So we will learn these kind of skewed representations or narrow representations if we use those in predictive algorithms. And of course, why we're all here today, public health and climate applications require attention to the populations that experience that highest risk. Now that we've seen actually AI deployments for several years now, around 5-10 years, we can see AI deployments in many aspects of life around the world, many examples we can learn from. Here's several that have come up. They're from not just North America, but also in South America. We've seen several of these. One of the most famous ones that came into the popular press, folks might have seen in a healthcare allocation algorithm, so predicting who would be put into an extra care management program at a hospital system, who would be called to remind them to take medication, remind them about their maybe blood pressure monitoring, was actually optimized based on cost instead of the actual level of morbidity. And so this actually created a lot of bias in terms of who was given that extra care. This was a system affecting over 1 million people in the United States. We see other examples where we have technologies that work better. For example, facial recognition in many of our phones today. They work better for folks with lighter skin, for men usually. And so these are products that have been out there and deployed before, really evaluated for how they work for everybody. So today, why does this matter? We know that we need to be able to speak in a data science language. We have multiple types of risks that we need to bring together across the data question. And traditional types of analyses might miss those really structural drivers and exposures. Climate data is more readily available, whereas the health and social aspects, for many of the reasons I mentioned, are often not considered in that data question. Climate modeling, many are familiar with a lot of the mathematical modeling we do to look at climate systems, also is in need of more data to fill, higher granularity, more locally, spatially, and as well as over time. So let's try and consider tying data science questions to the type of action they support, and also to think about they can be used in a more proactive way. Okay, so I've listed many here. I'm not going to spend much time, but basically the idea is that we can think about data science and AI tools at these multiple levels. And let's try and, I'll give some examples up here at an upstream level, thinking more about those kind of population analyses, thinking about gaps in the resources we need to make behavior changes, and also to eventually inform long-term adaptation investment. Here's a couple examples of using data over time that we've seen on the health and also built environment side. There is opportunity to get rapid information from for early population level risk signals, but a lot of data that might come in quickly, whether it's through an online system, a social media system, they rely on self-selection, who's contributing to those, and often the data is acting as a proxy. Some of the built environment signals coming from things like Google Street View, available in over 100 cities worldwide. We did a careful analysis showing there can be false positives. If we're looking at maybe greenery or sidewalks, we might get common issues when there's obfuscation by vehicles. And so simple prediction models that rely on these data without careful understanding of the mechanisms will, again, perpetuate those issues. One of my passions has become green spaces. This is where, of course, human and planetary health come together. This is on a live site, if anyone's interested, where we actually used some of the new satellite imagery. Of course, satellite bands have been used for decades at this point to understand aspects of the environment. But the visible spectrum now, along with deep learning methods, can allow us to pinpoint even single trees. And so not just identifying around Karachi the amount of greenery, but also delineating it. Green spaces including trees, different types of trees, grass, other parks. And so in order to do this, in doing this, we were able to quantify that greenery around the city in different amounts, and also identify that in conjunction where it has the most impact on not just heat exposure, but also, of course, all of the aspects greenery helps with in terms of physical health, mental health, and our spiritual health. How does it work for any of the folks interested under the hood? Basically, I'll walk you through. We take some sample of images from our location. We'll provide them with some labels. So here in the example images, we describe where are different types of greenery in this image, grass versus trees versus shrubs. Our algorithm for any kind of machine learning method takes these sample images, and this is basically to look at the error, so I won't go into it. Takes in these images and the examples such that it'll be able to, on any new images, annotate where those same types of places are. We did a little trick here that helped us resolve this better than current methods, and I'll leave folks interested to take a look at the paper here. This was done in collaboration with Dr. Zainab Samad and others in Department of Medicine who spurred this project with us. I would be remiss if I don't mention some of the latest AI tools many of us are probably familiar with, ChatGPT, for example. How do these work? They basically leverage the wealth of data that we now have, digitized sources, and are really good at using all of those patterns to then predict either the next word in terms of language models, or even we have models, vision models that can predict another pixel or what another, or infer what some missing area might look like. And here's just an example of that being done across different image modalities. But they also must be used with care. In some, you can see some of the news here, where some of these methods might hallucinate a medical topic, even, for example, make up a body part, and these have been shown to occur. And so we can't use these kind of systems blindly without, of course, thinking about some of those issues around what data is in there. So where are we going next? We'd like to actually use this data in conjunction with some of our partners, Urban Forest, who some of you might have seen their work here in Karachi and other places, to do rapid urban greenery development. And so what we can do is actually identify not just the places that are lacking greenery, but also where that have the most human impact. And of course, what that site design might look like, that should involve, as we had nice conversations, what kinds of trees, what kinds of greenery. That will all involve a lot of different players who come together to do this. And in doing this kind of rapid development, you can see here, there's on the order of 20 months, 15 months. We hope to also garner a lot of data around people's lived experience of these sites. So I'll just close off with some takeaways here. In terms of when we think about data questions, what do we want to use that data for? We often get a tendency from our friends in the computer science side to build tools and then look for certain problems to apply them to. But let's think carefully about not just what interventions we might want to do, but what action do we want to take? We could inform a social movement with this data, and that's also could have a positive effect. We need to integrate diverse expertise from the start. If we think about understanding those health mechanisms, that will again inform us with what kinds of data we need to be considering and identifying. And not just thinking about data science tools or AI tools as a solution in themselves, but also part of larger systems and in addition to technical outputs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chinara. I can invite a question or two from the audience.
Thank you, Rumi, for that fascinating talk. What advice might you have for our academic centers, our universities? We have the presence of the Honorable Minister of Climate Change here, and I'll speak to that in a minute. What kind of capacities should we be looking at in terms of data analytics capacity, data sciences development?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you know, there's many ways to think about the educational institution, and these days we have, you know, kind of these deep expertise in different areas. Of course, disciplines, as we think about them now, didn't exist, you know, if we think of centuries back. We had polymaths, we had people thinking across areas a lot more, and data science or the use of data, computer science, all of this can spread across these different areas. So we need folks who not just are skilled in these new technologies, which are important to embrace, but how are we going to use them? We need them to come together with existing disciplines. And you know, we're working on this in different ways. At our university at NYU, we're thinking about kind of foundational hands-on work across the disciplines. How can we have that AI course for students in the social sciences, in the natural sciences? What does that look like? And so I think kind of maybe, you know, getting rid of a little bit of the silos across the disciplines will bring us together.
Any other questions?
So I was just interested and concerned about that data that you have shown regarding the biasness and some kind of the racism that has been shown drastically through certain apps. So what do you think can be the suggested and the safer way to avoid this while, you know, dealing with the data, especially in the scenarios when we are trying to overcome the silos and yet having the same data from cross nationalities? So how do you suggest about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Always, you know, I do think, and we've heard this throughout the 2 days as well, that we need to bring different folks to the table, right? If we're developing things only from the computer science side, we don't have that understanding that we need to work with the different members of the community. Who will this need to work for? How do we evaluate that? So I think one of the best ways we can mitigate these challenges is to, from the outset, bring different folks to the table who kind of have an understanding of, you know, it's not something new that we could have things that widen inequities or only work for certain folks. And so, you know, bringing that to this conversation is essential.
Thanks so much, Dr. Chana. And thank you to all the presenters for their really excellent presentations, and to the audience for your engagement and also really excellent questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dalla and Professor Wantnak, for chairing this insightful and thought-provoking session. We also extend our sincere appreciation to all the presenters for their valuable contributions and to the audience for your thoughtful engagement. May I request our two chairs, Dr. Dalla and Professor Wantnak, to please come up and help present tokens of appreciation to our speakers. Starting with Ms. Miriam Kugle. Okay. Okay. Architects Lala Lokhmetis and Humaira Nazir. Dr. Rumi Chunara. Thank you, Dr. Dalla and Professor Wantnak. I would now like to invite Dr. Zulfikar Durrani, Head of UNDP Balochistan, to present the token of appreciation to our chairs. Thank you, Dr. Zulfikar Durrani. I would now like to request Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta to welcome the Honorable Minister, Dr. Musaddiq Masood Malik.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for surviving 1.5 days and for joining us in this final concluding session. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our chief guest, the Honorable Federal Minister for Climate Change, Dr. Musaddiq Malik. I have wanted to invite you, sir, to AKU for a very long time. And of the many criticisms that we levy on people, governments, I think I have to publicly acknowledge that they had the prescience and the foresight to appoint their most highly qualified minister to the most important ministry of climate change. Thank you very much for being with us today. So introduce Dr. Musaddiq Malik. He is a distinguished economist and a public policy expert. He holds postdoctoral fellowships in health economics and medical decision making, the PhD, master's, and MBA from the University of Illinois. Dr. Malik has served in several key leadership positions, including being the special assistant to the Prime Minister for Water and Power and an advisor on water and energy, and he's contributed to major reforms in water governance, energy planning, and sustainable development. He's led internationally strategic policy initiatives in several countries, in Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Puerto Rico, including designing a science and technology-based economic transformation strategy. And in his professional career, he served in several senior positions in the US, and Charles River Associates, if I may say, Arthur Little, SRI International, representing his extensive experience in economic transformation, industrial development, and public sector strategy. We are so very grateful, sir, that you found time to be here. I know this is so close to COP30. I bring you apologies from the president, who is unfortunately very unwell. He survived yesterday, but could not really manage today. But we are so very thrilled that we have our provost here, who I know is leaving tonight, but she found the time to be here. So let me pass the floor back to you to introduce our provost and for her to formally welcome the Honorable Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhutta. We will now begin session D, the concluding segment of our conference. This session brings together the reflections, insights, and recommendations emerging from 2 days of discussions on climate change, the built environment, and the pathways for resilience. Before we begin, I would like to invite Sayyida Asifa for a recitation from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا.
In the name of Allah, the most beneficent,
and the most merciful. And hold fast altogether by the rope which God stretches out for you. And be not divided among yourselves. And remember with gratitude God's favor on you. For you were enemies, and he joined your hearts in love, so that by his grace you became brothers. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you, Asifa. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to now invite Dr. Tanya Bubla to open our concluding session and to share a message from the President of AKU, Dr. Suleiman Shahabuddin. Dr. Bubla is the Provost and Vice President Academic at Aga Khan University and previously served as Professor and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at Simon Fraser University. A Fellow of both the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences and the Royal Society of Canada, she holds a PhD in biology and a JD from the University of Alberta, and has an extensive background in health law and intellectual property. Her research focuses on genomics, advanced therapeutics, and barriers to clinical adoption of new technologies. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tanya Bubla.
Thank you, and hello again. Good afternoon. So it's my real pleasure to be here today. I do have words for the President, but I'm just going to start with a minor anecdote. This morning, I started my morning with a WhatsApp video call from Antarctica, from very close to the South Pole. So my husband is the chief scientist for all things polar, Arctic and Antarctic in Canada. And he is currently with the Chilean military on a base very close to the South Pole, so on the actual continent, not on the ice sheet. And so it was a real treat to see what they're doing and all of the equipment that they're lugging up and down. It's quite mountainous. I was surprised at how rocky and mountainous it is. But of course we know that while there's incredible vulnerabilities here in Pakistan, top 10 countries for impacts of climate change, the poles are also disproportionately affected. So in Antarctica, we have calving glaciers, Greenland, where we've got huge sort of sections of the Greenland ice sheet just sort of falling off into the ocean. This is going to be really quite catastrophic for climatic patterns, ocean currents. And a lot of this contributes to climate change by creating feedback loops, right? And it's the feedback loops at the tipping point of the point of no return where our climatic patterns will be irrevocably changed, and we're either beyond or very close to those tipping points. So the other commonality, so normally when he's not in Antarctica, he lives on an Arctic island north of the Northwest Passage called Victoria Island in an Inuit hamlet called Cambridge Bay. It has 1,700 Inuit. There are no cars on this island. There's snow machines and ATVs, so four-wheel bikes. But the traditional patterns and way of life for the Inuit, where they have migrations, where they connect with their relatives and family or have hunting grounds on the mainland. So in the winter, the ice isn't just a barrier. It actually makes their lives more accessible because they can travel across the ice to visit friends and relatives. And what they're finding, and this was really similar to the stories that we heard yesterday, is that they can no longer rely on their indigenous knowledge to predict their ability to travel and their ability of the ice patterns, the thickness of the ice, the stability of the ice. and where the hunting grounds are. So for people that rely on the land, that live on the land, this has really profound effects. And like here in Pakistan, this is not their doing, right? This is a population that will bear disproportionately the burden of the excesses of our dominant civilizations. And so, I think that framing around, and I don't want to use the term vulnerability. I find that the term vulnerability can be problematic. These populations are not vulnerable. I'd love to see anyone here or anyone in Washington going and surviving in those kinds of climatic conditions, right? These are populations that are adapted to incredibly extreme, from our perspective, conditions. And so what we are doing is destroying that connectivity and that tradition and that history of time immemorial between their well-adapted lifestyles and their environments. So it's us that is causing that, that maladaptation. So I really appreciated the call from Minister Iqbal yesterday that it's all very well and good to have a conference like this where we've contributed quite substantially to carbon use by bringing people in internationally and other things. It behoves us to offer solutions. And at the international level, the things that we can do globally, those solutions really are at the base of international and global politics. And it's incredibly difficult to do that when the world's largest emitters are just not at the table and not participating. And I honestly, I hope that this is a political blip. But the fixation on selfishness and self-centeredness is something that I think as a global community and as parts of civil society, we really need to address. So those are my words. And now I bring the words from the President. So I'll do a proper and warm welcome to our chief guest, Dr. Musaddiq Malik, the Federal Minister of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. Zulfi, Dr. Bhutta, thank you so much for all that you do at AKU and for the global health community and now for the climate change community. You are a force of nature, and I just appreciate every moment that I get to spend with you. Sorry, that was me, not the President. Panelists, speakers, and participants, AKU and AKD and colleagues. So it's been an enlightening and invigorating 2 days. I'm grateful. This is me reading. So now you see me reading the President's speech. So President Suleiman is grateful to everyone who has presented, participated, raised important questions, and contributed to the success of this conference, the first of its kind in Pakistan. And I'm particularly grateful to Minister Malik for joining us. We are all very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts and following panel discussion. Over the last 2 days, we've taken a close look at the threat that global warming poses to our infrastructure, and we've examined an array of locally appropriate and effective solutions for making our built environment more resilient and keeping people safe. I think we've established one very, excuse me, one very important, sorry. I was sitting too close to him yesterday, so this is the effects of public health. Public Health 101. What's missing is not options or opportunities for action. What's missing is a response that's equal to the challenge, a response that brings together civil society, the government, and the committees on the front lines, along with experts from architecture, urban planning, economics, healthcare, data science, and other fields. It's urgent that we continue to conduct research and learn more so that we can act more effectively. And we are absolutely dedicated to doing that here at AKU. We are working to develop one of the most advanced climate and environmental research laboratories in Pakistan. More to come this year, or next year, we're hoping. We are also working on some of the most innovative practical solutions at population level to build resilience and climate adaptation, which will include community participation and ownership. But there's a tremendous amount that we can do now to ensure that the toll of extreme weather in the future doesn't continue to mount. So we can control how climate change is affecting our built environment and our people. So President Suleiman would encourage all of us to continue the discussions that have started here, to look for ways to collaborate, to continue expanding knowledge, and to actively seek out opportunities to translate what we know into actual results. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhupla. To present the key recommendations emerging from this conference, I am honored to invite Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta. Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta is the founding director of both the Institute of Global Health and Development and the Center of Excellence in Women and Child Health at AKU. Internationally, he serves as the Robert Harding Inaugural Chair in the Global Child Health at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto and is the co-director of the Sick Kids Center for Global Child Health. Widely regarded as one of the world's foremost authorities in global health, he has shaped international policy through pioneering work in maternal, newborn, child health, nutrition, and health system strengthening. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta.
The perils of security systems. Yeah, thank you. Is that full screen now? Can we get that on full screen? Yeah, all right, wonderful. No, I'll use my own. Honorable Minister Saab, ladies and gentlemen, I have one of the most difficult tasks over the next 20 minutes in trying to summarize an entire conference of 1.5 days and to try and see if we can convey some of the key messages to our Honorable Minister. But he's assured me that he's got time, and so therefore I'll try and sell coals to Newcastle in terms of telling the Minister of Climate Change why climate change is important. But what I'm going to try and do, ladies and gentlemen, and this is not just my presentation, I'm presenting this on behalf of many who were part of this conference and is preceding things, and I'm going to divide my presentation in 3 parts. The problem and its dimensions, especially in the context of what we're talking about in terms of infrastructure, what are the potential solutions, those that we have discussed and potentially, maybe not discussed in greater detail, and what is potentially a way forward. And this I'm going to leave relatively incomplete because we want to hear from the Minister and our panelists who are going to join us in this session. So the first question is this real? Is climate change real? And maybe in this hall, there have been very few skeptics, but I can guarantee you that in the geography that I come from, and spend a large chunk of my time in North America, there are many people who have questioned the very essence of what we are dealing with as a global emergency. And it is an emergency, because if you look at last year, it was the hottest year on record. We crossed the 1.5 degrees centigrade barrier in terms of where people said it would be relatively impossible to reverse. And also, many of the extreme heat events, the number of days that we have extremely hot, were also maximal last year. Now, in terms of the epidemiology of climate change, we all know that the maximal emissions for climate change are from the high emitters, the proverbial north. The impacts are much worse on low and middle income countries, on countries like ours who don't produce the carbon but yet suffer the consequences of this. Now, so far, the evidence of this has not been based on the best science in terms of numbers, because there hasn't been quantification of the impact of climate change by geography. But we published our Global Burden of Disease report last month. It was released in Berlin, And I want to show you that for the first time we have estimates in terms of the number of deaths related to high temperature and their trends over time. And this is absolutely very different in terms of its slope and scale in low and low middle income countries. So there is no question that both the health impacts and also the economic impacts of climate change are much worse in low and middle income countries. Now, this question was asked during the course of our conference. What are the vulnerabilities and what are the pathways from climate change to health impacts? And this is a graphic that shows why we in Pakistan look at times climate change through the lens of disasters. You know, floods, drought, heat wave, and also some of the indirect effects that happen through water, air quality, etc. But these impacts are largely modulated by pre-existing social conditions. And as I had mentioned yesterday, things like pre-existing gender inequalities, socioeconomic diversity, and also where people live and grow in marginalized communities are a major driver of the impact that climate change has on health and health-related outcomes. Let me, Minister Saab, illustrate that with a couple of examples. Now, our colleagues from the Bartlett Institute yesterday showed us this map. It's a map that shows what has happened in Karachi over time. And between 2000 and 2022, in just 20 years, green spaces in Karachi, these green bits, have virtually disappeared. And as a result, the populations at risk from impacts of climate change within one of the mega cities of Pakistan have exacerbated greatly in terms of numbers and their so-called vulnerability, even though Tanya does not like the term. Now, what is the evidence that the most vulnerable in terms of climate change impacts are disproportionately affected? Let me give you this as an example. In 2015, Karachi had one of its worst and an unexpected heat wave pattern, which happened during Ramadan. And within a 24-hour period, close to around 1,500 people died. And this map shows you the geospatial location of where those deaths took place. And if you look at where those deaths took place, they were largely in parts of the city which we all recognize as residents here as the informal settlements, as the slum populations. And these are where the urban poor live. And these populations where the urban poor live in a big mega city like this are at disproportionate risk because they become heat ovens, particularly during heat dome effects. The houses are congested, built in a way that you really don't have any adaptation capacity. They have limited ventilation. They're also water insecure, and they do not have adequate services. And our colleagues, Joseph Augustine and Chris Berman, have actually looked at this in the context of thermal imaging. So if you take one such average settlement of Karachi, an area where we have been working in, I believe they've got a thermal image of Dhobi Ghat that they showed yesterday. You can see very clearly all of these red things that you see here are extremely hot roofs, dependent upon structures, building materials, etc. And therefore, these areas also house people who are at great risk. Now, this vulnerability that we have is often not appreciated in the context of urban-rural disparities. Now, the contexts are different. Urban heat island effects are different. Rural populations are somewhat protected from this. But there are other problems in rural areas: health disparities, infrastructure, lack of access, and also the fact that in many rural areas, women bear a disproportionate burden of work and also exposure. As you can see here, a lot of the agriculture work is done by women in rural areas. And what we don't talk about in the climate environment, in the climate change environment, are the gender inequalities that we face because of social norms. Women bring most of the water in rural areas. Even though this may be changing over time, they still are given a lot of the tasks that increase their exposure. And unlike men, they do not have the ability to adapt. Their dress code precludes it. Their work hours preclude it. When I was living in Karachi, one of the things that I used to see very early in the morning at daybreak is a lot of these people going to work when it was really dark. And the reason why in the peak of the summer, many people went for work at that early hour is because they could finish their work by midday. Women do not have that ability to do that. And in rural populations, many villages that we work in, if you do not have water sanitation, hygiene facilities, and women and others have to go into the fields, that's again a huge risk that many women face and do not go at times when it is extreme, when it is dark and maybe less hot than other times of the day. So there are these structural differences. Now, is there any manifestation of this? Do we have any data that women and children are disproportionately affected by climate change? We have that through disasters. When we looked at this in 2022, in terms of the number of deaths that had occurred in that short time period of massive floods, close to around 33 million people were affected, 16 million were children. Of the 1,700 deaths that were recorded in the first week after the floods, 600 were among children. More than 600,000 pregnant women were displaced. So you can easily imagine that the climate crisis in Pakistan is a crisis of the most vulnerable, and it disproportionately impacts women and children. Now, the health impacts of climate change are generally viewed through the lens of how these factors impact things like vector transmittable diseases, infectious diseases, diarrhea burdens, air pollution, and many of the other recognizable issues. And you will notice that in this big graphic that led global policy for a very long time, women and children don't appear, because the effects on the health of women and children, particularly young infants, has been largely ignored. My colleague Anna Bonnell here from the London School has done a lot of seminal initial work on this in looking at the biology of heat impact on women, particularly pregnant women. But we also had the opportunity to look at this from another lens. As the Honorable Minister knows, one of the biggest public health crises, public health nutrition crisis in Pakistan is a crisis of stunting. Why do we have stunted children? And 40% on average, and in some districts of Pakistan, close to 60% of all children are stunted. They're shorter than their genetic potential would be. Our team recently looked at this in a very objective way of looking at geographic disparities in stunting between various parts of Pakistan. As you can see, underweight children, underweight women, which are wasted women, largely clustered around the south of the country. And if you take stunted and wasted children, it doesn't take an Einstein to work out that it's the same geographies, where you have wasted women and wasted, stunted children. We were interested in looking at risk factors and drivers, and that needed an assembly of the data sets of the kind that Rumi Chunara is talking about, is looking at ecological factors, actual geospatial data from measurements at a household level. And if you look at things like changes in average temperature, annual temperature, over that time period from 2010 to 2020, it does not affect the entire country equally. It affects the parts of the country largely towards the south, southern Punjab, and also is related to changes in precipitation. So these are also the areas of Pakistan where precipitation has depreciated greatly. So when you put all of this together in a model to say, what drives stunting in Pakistan, with all of these factors put together? Now, there are many things that we impact linear growth or growth in infancy that are positive. So being born wealthy, living in an urban area, food secure household, being born larger, mother who's well nourished, all of these are associated with improved growth in infants. But some things are associated with negative growth. And in this model, you see that that's heat, crowding, and also high burden of infections. We have also begun to recognize, this is my last epidemiology slide, that there are things that we do not measure, mental health. So with the floods in 2022, I think somebody asked this question yesterday, there was an effect that everybody recognized, right immediately after the floods. We recently went and looked at the impact of that flood in 2022 at a population level amongst people in an affected district. And even 2 to 3 years on, we find that depression in women of reproductive age, anxiety, general anxiety disorders, prevalent in about a third of that population, significantly higher than controlled populations unaffected by flood displacement. So, Honorable Minister Saab, that's something you already know. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much. This conference was all about solutions. What can be done? And on this, there is tremendous politicization of this problem now. There are two approaches to climate change, to the audience, to the students in the audience. You can either have mitigation, and it should not be either or, mitigation, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprints, and reducing fossil fuel-related environmental change, which has been 90% of what, or more, of what the global finance allocations and the global community has been focused on since the Paris Accords. Or you could try and do some resilience and adaptation. On the latter, there has been relatively little investment. And on mitigation, the big debate has been who should pay for it. And as you know, there has not been a consensus at COP30 in Belém on whether or not fossil fuel emissions should be reduced. And that, I think, personally is a challenge. But what about other forms of compensation? Now, Pakistan suffered close to around $30 billion. Debatable whether the range is 20 or more, but at least $30 billion in terms of losses in the 2022 floods. Of the commitments that were made, I believe that around or less than $600 million were ever given to Pakistan. And if money was given, it was generally in terms of loans and other restructured things as opposed to grants. Now, the Honorable Minister may have the better figures on this. This is being cited from the Planning Commission in terms of their work. So the bottom line is, we cannot depend upon others to bail us out. And that is the reason why we've been organizing these conferences for the last couple of years, to try and see how can we stand on our feet both for science, solutions, innovations, and civic society organization. And that is our role as a university and as an Institute for Global Health and Development. So let's start by saying, what is the situation today? So are we prepared for climate adaptation and resilience? And how resilient are we? We didn't have time to present this in great detail, but Dr. Das alluded to this. We've recently had an opportunity through funding that we received from IDRC to look at this in some of the most vulnerable districts of Pakistan with diverse and different forms of climate exposures. So this 5-district study, ladies and gentlemen, was done in the northern areas of Pakistan, and we deliberately took 2 different districts because we wanted to see in the area which has been the focus of so much attention, what is the difference between Gizar and Shigar? And we took 3 districts in the south, 1 district in Balochistan that nobody knows anything about, Kachi. It's an area where people don't go, but it's right next to Sibi, and it's a very hot area apparently. And then 2 districts in Sindh, 1 flood-affected district and 1 affected by climate change. Now, this was an assessment using standardized methods and tools to look at climate adaptation, resilience capacity, and I'm going to summarize this in just a couple of slides. So the general notion is that, and somebody asked this question today also, that somehow or the other these northern districts are not facing the same challenge as the hot districts, and therefore perhaps they're not at risk in terms of the same consequences of climate change. But when you put a measure of the kind that I've talked about in terms of climate adaptation and resilience, how do they measure? So just one slide to summarize our finding. And this is a spider plot. These are called spider plots because they summarize a range of data. So the resilience scores, vulnerability and resilience scores, constitute of a range of things that you don't have to get into. Transformative capacity, coping capacities, adaptation, exposure, sensitivity, etc. But what I want to show you is that Shigar as a district here at the bottom, right, is just as bad in terms of its vulnerability and lack of adaptation capacity as the districts in Sindh. And that, to me, was a huge surprise, because it faces a very different challenge than the challenge of climate change and heat. Gizar is a little bit better, but the bottom line here is we are not prepared. Many of our districts and our district health systems, district infrastructure is not prepared. So, Mr. Saab, we have been so blessed in this conference to have some absolutely outstanding speakers and scholars from Pakistan and teachers of teachers. So one absolutely fantastic presentation yesterday was by Professor Sajda Wandel and also Dr. Zara Hussain. And I'm going to probably not do justice to their work, but I want to show you what they shared. So both of them talked about traditional systems and the need to integrate these traditional systems within our situational analysis. They talked about how we need to completely rethink and change our approach, and instead of looking at this through a traditional scientific lens, need to try and incorporate holistic knowledge systems that are embedded in our traditions and also what communities recognize and know about this. And Professor Wandel was phenomenal in showing us several case studies, of which I've just cherry-picked one. I looked at Cholistan, desert, highly impacted. But look, people living there already have structures that they have probably developed through tacit knowledge over centuries in terms of adaptation and building their resilience. Yet our knowledge in terms of how we respond to some of this and whether or not this is at the limits of adaptation and resilience, we don't quite know. But certainly, this needs to be much more commonplace knowledge within our traditional academia and also within our architectural, engineering, and health systems frame in learning from these structures and building materials. So what she provided us with is an approach in terms of how we can combine community engineered vernacular planning with contemporary engineering and see how that convergence can help us emerge with better solutions than what we have. I was quite taken by Zara Hussain's presentation yesterday, and she talked about northern areas and some of these vulnerable populations and made this statement, which I'm not sure whether this is your original statement or somebody else's quotation, but what you said in terms of fragility being a condition in which life unfolds is really, if it's yours, it's phenomenal, and I will shamelessly cite it again and again, because it's absolutely true. Because this fragility is not fate. It is absolutely where people learn how to adapt and how to move forward and how to do better. And you told us about traditional architecture in these fragile mountain ecologies, and in terms of how geometry, social behavioral patterns, help us understand how these communities live, adapt, survive, and thrive in those areas, geography. There's lots of lessons to be learned from how people both in the deserts of Cholistan and how in the northern areas live and adapt to climate change and its challenges over time. So what was recommended was that these challenges ask us also to resituate our responses, particularly on the built environment, on engineering and architectural solutions within ecological relationships and not traditional scientific domains. And also the importance of reorienting our education in terms of providing better knowledge to our students on relational systems. And if I can summarize, the way forward that you told us was on community engineered knowledge systems, which I think is a very important statement, and also using culture as a cross-cutting theme in development. I'm not sure that we do this in our institutions. We have Nawan here who will tell us whether or not this is part of your curriculum, the knowledge of culture, development, and indigenous practices, but certainly extremely important. I also want to tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing in collaboration with the London School of of Hygiene Tropical Medicine and the Bartlett School at University College London. It was summarized today by Jaidas as part of this large SHAPES trial that is funded by the Wellcome Trust. And what we are trying to do in this is to learn from the community and to help put some adaptive structural changes in place at population level in villages and to evaluate its impact through a formal cluster randomized trial. So not just do it as a purely qualitative exercise, but actually put some numbers on it and try and get health and other outcomes. So a range of urban interventions, Jaidas mentioned, had been tested and looked at, evaluated, also including alternatives to expensive reflective paints, traditional systems such as slate lime as an alternative to solar reflective paints, roof shading, external wall shades, as well as solar reflective painting that I've just talked about, and the potential of vegetation. In rural areas, a range of interventions have also been evaluated and tested in this pilot phase, including extra shading, and some of these have been piloted in terms of also extension of verandas. And he and the team have looked at not just perceptions, but also quantified measurements of temperature changes related to these interventions, both within households and at an individual level. When the results of this come out, both in terms of the structural adaptations that have been done here, I think our team will be able to provide comprehensive evidence as to what might be worth scaling up in the country and how much might it cost. Now, lastly, I want to turn to the discussion today at several levels on what can we do to build climate resilient health systems. I'm unsure if Miriam Google is still here. No? So our own AKU expert on net carbon emissions and climate adaptation presented to us a number of interventions across our development network that are focused on what we can do within hospitals. But we were presented Pakistan's approach to health system vulnerability. And Minister Saab, I'll be very interested in your views on this. And a lot of the interventions within the health system structural adaptation are focused on decarbonization. And I have nothing against decarbonization, but I think it's only done one piece of what we need within the health system adaptation. So the Ministry of Health's decarbonization program is basically the entirety of their health system's response at this point in time. And what we recognize from our recent work that was shared by Humaira and Lala today is that we recognize that in our district health systems, the vulnerability and the health system resilience also requires working with the workforce to train them properly, ensuring that the supply chains are adequate for responding to climate change and extreme heat events. And also importantly, that the environmental interventions that we have in these very facilities not only are focused on net carbon emissions, but also on providing adequate water sanitation services in those facilities. So it needs to be a lot more holistic than just a narrow approach on carbon emissions. And they looked at a number of building blocks and a number of solutions in this large district. And if you look at these 20 plus facilities that they looked at, the net price tag for just adapting those facilities to be more climate friendly was only 43 million rupees, which in normal terms for a population of 1.5 million is, to use the usual term, peanuts. And it's something that can be easily done through the district health system if there was awareness. So let me conclude and at least summarize this part before we get into the panel. First of all, sir, climate change is ubiquitous across Pakistan, south, north, everywhere. It's impacting our lives and livelihoods. And we need to focus on adaptation and resilience building as much as we can focus on mitigation strategy. We need to do both, but I think there has not been enough focus on adaptation and resilience. Within this, climate-friendly and resilient infrastructure is an essential part of the response. And we've spent a lot of time in this conference looking at what needs to be done in urban contexts and in rural context. And it does not have to be massively expensive. I mean, the knee-jerk reaction of people is, this is going to cost us an arm and a leg. And our assessment indicates that it can be an incremental investment, and even if it costs, over time, it will pay for itself because the cost of inaction is massive and probably more than what it would take to develop those. We've also had extensive discussion and clarity on how important it is to not forget indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and knowledge that we have within our neighborhoods, in our geographies, that we can benefit from, both in terms of community engagement, buy-in, and eventual ownership of solutions. We can import, transplant, parachute any solution into an area. I can guarantee you it will never survive because there will be no community ownership of this. And then we have initial promising data from small-scale initiatives for improvement, including decarbonization efforts, but they need to be scaled up. So we need to also focus on scaling up and how can we do this across various sectors. And my final point on this is probably much more relevant for you, sir, is that how do we create communities and networks of practice? How do we make sure that the Ministry of Health does not do its own thing and that the Ministry of Planning does not do its own thing around climate, that how can we have a Ministry of Climate Change and Development actually help bring people together through cross-cutting, cross-sectoral research and impact evaluation. And my last point is for the audience, because you've been here for the last day and a half, and I'm amazed that you're here on a Saturday and in force. You see, you have to recognize climate change as an existential issue, not just for Pakistan, but for the planet. We may live in different countries, we may be different colors, denominations, cultures, religions, but we're all one humanity, and we have only one planet. Maybe not even the Elon Musks of the world will be able to build rockets to go to the Mars or elsewhere to colonize it. At the end of the day, if we lose this planet, that's it. And in this particular scenario, the one thing that will do the most damage to our planet is sitting back and doing nothing. So I hope, if nothing else, this conference will give you the impetus to get involved, engaged, and from whichever perspective you come in, whether you are scientists, scholars, students, or honorable future leaders from our Civil Services Academy, you are principally the agents of change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Bhutta. We will now move into our panel discussion titled The Context and Solutions for the Climate Challenges in Pakistan and the Built Environment. Before we begin, we would like to introduce our 5 panelists who will be contributing to this important discussion. Our first panelist is Dr. Moeed Yusuf. Dr. Moeed Yusuf is the Vice Chancellor of Beacon House National University and one of the Pakistan's most prominent scholars of political science and international relations. He is the former National Security Advisor of Pakistan and has held senior academic and policy roles at the U.S. Institute of Peace and Harvard Kennedy School. Dr. Yusuf has taught at Boston University, George Washington University, LUMS, and Quaid-e-Azam University, and is the author of Brokered Bargaining. He holds a master's in international relations and a PhD in political science from Boston University. Please welcome Dr. Moeed Yusuf.
If we can find him, where is he? He's sitting right at the back. Carry on. Introduce the next person.
Our second panelist is Professor Dr. Samra Mohsin Khan. Professor Samra Mohsin Khan is the Vice President of the Institute of Architects Pakistan and a leading architect, educator, and urban historian with over 37 years of experience. She has held senior roles at Comzats University, NCA, and Eastern Regional Organization for Planning and Human Settlements Pakistan, and has held UNESCO-funded heritage conversations projects in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and FATA. Her work spans architectural pedagogy, sustainable urbanism, and cultural heritage, with contributions to major national and international design projects, including the Islamabad and Lahore airports. Her research focuses on traditional architecture, historic city cores, and climate-resilient, heritage-led urban development. Please welcome Dr. Samra. Our third panelist is Professor Dr. Noman Ahmed. Professor Noman Ahmed is an architect, urban planner, and academic leader, currently serving as Dean of Faculty of Architecture and Management Sciences at NED University. As the founding head of NED's Department of Architecture and Planning, he has played a pivotal role in shaping architectural and urban studies education in Pakistan. His research spans urban development, housing, and infrastructure, with notable books such as Water Supply in Karachi and Karachi, the Land Issue. A prolific policy columnist with over 600 published articles, he is the recipient of the HEC Best Teacher Award and the Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan Memorial Award. Please welcome Dr. Noman Ahmed. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Ali Taqir Sheikh. Dr. Ali Taqir Sheikh is a leading expert on climate change, sustainable development, and environmental policy in Pakistan and South Asia. He is the founding CEO of Lead Pakistan and has advised national governments, UN agencies, and global climate finance institutions on climate governance and adaptation. His work focuses on climate finance, resilience planning, and policy advocacy for vulnerable populations. He is also a prominent author and commentator on climate, development, and public policy. Please welcome Dr. Ali Taqir Sheikh. Our final panelist is Dr. Qamar Mahmood. Dr. Qamar Mahmood is a senior program specialist at the International Development Research Center. He manages research programs on health, climate change adaptation, water resource management, and sustainable development, primarily across the Middle East, North Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Dr. Mahmood has extensive experience in global health, environmental science, and public policy, contributing to evidence-based solutions for climate resilience. Please welcome Dr. Qamar Mahmood. Dr. Bhutta will now moderate the session.
No, not at all. So this is my favorite part of the conference, where I get to interact with fantastic people. Can you hear me now? No? Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. So this is, as I said, a wonderful opportunity to exchange ideas, and the Honorable Minister assured me that he would listen to this, and then we'll have his pearls of wisdom. So what I'll do is, in the interest of time, probably ask you two questions in sequence, and I'll ask them individually. And then at the end, I will ask you the one final question, the same for all of you, if we have time. So I'll start with you, Moeed. And you've been with us for the last day and a half, and I want to ask you if you could maybe give us a very succinct summary of what are your views on the security dimensions of climate change in Pakistan.
Thank you, and it's been a wonderful day and a half. I think the answer will be very, very simple if we can define national security as it should be defined. Our fundamental problem when we talk about security is that we take a lens, and we've taken it for 75 years, which essentially talks about hard security. If you go with that, it's a longer answer. But if you look at our stated national security policy, it talks about climate and security, it talks about multiple sort of aspects of security, but the fundamental point it makes is that national security equals the safety, security, prosperity, and dignity of your most disempowered citizen. That's called human security. If you want to get to human security, you need economic security, i.e. resources. So if you talk about climate change and what we've been hearing for the past day and a half, all you've talked about is vulnerability, fragility. That's the human security aspect. We want to fix that. You've mentioned numbers in hundreds of billions of dollars. I think we should drop that conversation. The world is not going to come to our rescue. So you need economic resources that are then redistributed towards human security, and climate is going to be one major pillar of that. If that's the way we're going to think, it's the easiest answer on earth, which is every penny we can spare should go to this. If we're going to continue debating what kind of security is more important than this, then I'm afraid we are where we are over the past 75 years, and we'll continue down that path.
It's an existential issue for Pakistan in the eyes of many.
Again, let me just say this. A lot of people say that, there isn't thinking about this. We've got the minister sitting here, his predecessors. There is thinking. And you wouldn't have gotten a formal document, and not one, now multiple documents where there is consensus among policymakers of any time, civil and military, that this is existential. That's there. The question is, how do you translate this into actual implementation? And the sooner we can get over this debate on whether this is important or not, the sooner we'll get to doing this. And the answer, frankly, remains Pakistan can be the strongest state in the world. But if we have the kind of vulnerability we have, this region may not exist as it does in the next 50 years. So that's where we are.
Sobering thoughts. Samara, you represent the entire community of architectural engineers. You come from a long...
architects, sir.
Architects. I call architects engineers also. You may be doing different forms of engineering. But let me ask you, what can your community of architects do for solutions in Pakistan related to climate change?
Thank you so much, Professor Bhutta. Before I answer the particular question, if you allow me to build a very short framework. What is the major contributor to the rising CO2 greenhouse gases which has caused this catastrophe? And when you talk about climate change, climate resilience, responses to climate, we have to see what is causing that, which is urbanization, and mainly urbanization in Asia, which means more construction of infrastructure, which means more deforestation, which means increasing urban populations. So what does this do? This increases human consumption, this increases a crazy use of resources, the energy costs, the heating, cooling, fueling of our cities is really actually breaking our world apart. If you look at South Asia, the most urbanized country, interestingly, is in Pakistan. So Pakistan is classified as 65% urban, while India is classified as 50% urban. So the energy that is used to fuel our cities and how the cities are built, I think what architects can well do is to respond to how cities are built, how cities are developed. At the Institute of Architects Pakistan and also EROF International, which I am part of, we have developed these 4 points. I'm not saying this is an exhaustive list of everything that we need to do, but these are the things that we are talking about. We're talking about preserving cultural heritage. We're talking about not just the tangible heritage, but the intangible heritage as being an important part of our world and leading the regeneration of our cities. So the decaying parts of our cities, which we term as, okay, this is old, this is heritage, must be pulled down. These are actually the areas where our cities can be regenerated. The second thing we're talking about is environmental stewardship to mitigate climate change, which obviously means to reduce the carbon footprint by using renewable energy sources, which we talked about a great deal today, which means water conservation through implementation of these efficient water usage systems, rainwater harvesting in cities, and grey water reuse, which means waste management of our systems in the cities to promote waste reduction and to recycle and compost a lot of the waste, which means green space creation, which may be one of the most important things we can do our cities at all levels, that we build urban parks, that we plant more trees, that we increase the tree canopy for improved air quality and biodiversity. Number third is resilient infrastructure for disaster response, which I think a lot of people have talked about, and I'm not going to elaborate on that. And finally, to have sustainable city design. This is the core of what architects want to do in Pakistan and over the world, where we are designing more mixed-use neighborhoods where they're walkable cities, where people do not have to commute or use transport. Obviously, we need better public transports, but we have cities where people can walk, where we have spaces where all can occupy. When we talk about the poor, we have to take into account the urban poor. Where do they have to go? Where are the spaces that we are creating in the cities for everyone in the cities to walk, to sit under a tree, to enjoy a little fountain of water maybe, to improve physical and mental health. Thank you.
And when you build that, can you let me know? I'll move there.
Absolutely.
So Dr. Noman, I'm continuing on the same vein actually to you as someone who leads an institution of learning. I want to ask you, how can we create communities of practice to address climate resilience and also appropriate design across disciplines? Is this something that should only be done in schools of arts and architecture? Or how can we make sure that there is cross-disciplinarity? This is the first conference, I think, in Pakistan, where we brought health professionals, public health epidemiologists, climate scientists, and architects together. If I'm wrong, let me know. But I mean, why should this have been the first meeting?
Thank you. I begin this conversation by an opening remark, a citation from a very well-known sociologist, Margaret Mead, who said that never underestimate the capacity of a group of citizens. If there has been a change in the world, it has always been brought by them. So my work and obviously the experience I have gained during the past more than 3 decades of teaching architecture, understanding research, undertaking research, is that our communities in different cross-sections of the society have tremendous potential. And that potential over remains, in fact, unnoticed. But when you engage with them, you find that this potential can be transformed into very useful action. And in many cases, action that can be translated into what we popularly call as public policy. But that often gets missed out. And we have seen that over the period of time, whenever these communities were addressed with the right intention to understand their overall life needs, their overall requirements, the challenges they face, the type of issues they come across, and you provide them with a little catalytical support from various professions associated, a change starts happening. The challenge is that how we sustain this effort. In the good old days, there was a popular mechanism that we used to call as pilot projects. And those pilot projects, spearheaded by some very able social scientists, were basically undertaken with the hope that if and when the outcomes of these pilot projects would become useful and successful and would develop the potential of replicability, the state would adopt them and would translate them into public policy, and this would become the norm. We experimented that in housing, and we found some very useful results in different parts of this country. And unfortunately, when those results were taken to the policymakers, there was little response, and obviously the type of action that was needed at the state level, that did not come through. So that forced us to actually change the approach, and that was that instead of possibly relying too much on the state responses, you can continue with this process. As you say, the communities of practice can continue as an organic process on its own. And in many parts of this city and other parts of Pakistan, this is happening. So the synergy is that whatever you learn from the community action, you document it, analyze it, and see that how it can be positioned to bring about a greater change and cause that change as a permanent process. The only thing it requires is connectivity to like-minded academia, and academia that is responsive to come out and engage with those type of exercises, and also to learn from the mistakes. And by learning from the mistakes, one has to first accept them as mistakes, which is, in fact, a very difficult thing to do in our context. But the more open-ended and open-hearted we are about such type of initiatives, the greater is the effectiveness of this process of change that is happening very quietly, but not necessarily getting noticed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very thoughtful answer. Ali, you are probably one of the few economists in the audience who understand economics at scale and have looked at climate change also from the lens of how are we going to make a difference and afford it. But tell us a little bit about the cost-benefit ratio of investments in this space, and particularly in the context of Pakistan?
To be honest, I don't know. And part of the reason is that I'm not an economist, but that's only part of the reason. Mostly because I probably had some answers before coming to this conference. After 2 days, I don't. There's no global methodology, and there cannot be one. It will hinge on many things, and we know it, and that's exactly what we learned today. First, at least 5 factors that come to my mind, and in some ways I'm synthesizing what I heard. Seamless integration with your ecology. Now, if it's not, sustainability cannot be assured. That's one. Second is social capital or community formation, existence or prevalence of community. If it doesn't exist, no matter how strong the built environment is. And a beautiful example is earthquake 2005, when social capital became operative and people rebuilt their lives, compared to a disaster, let's say, in Islamabad when a tower collapsed, and it has still not been rebuilt, and everybody living there has migrated elsewhere, and oftentimes out of country. So the community formation is the second one. And third is its own location geography. And we have seen that we need to respect the diversity of ecosystems that exist. I think you started with Cholistan, and somebody ended from desert ecology to mountain ecology to floodplains to plains. We need to respect and grant legitimacy to this diversity. And that is a foundational key for resilience. That's what I gather. And then, probably less important, but still very important, is the materials and the construction standards and the ventilation and light and shade and shade in the sense of plantation and all that help control temperature and health and mobility of the residents. We didn't talk much about the mobility inside the space of residents, such as females. That's where the culture and other parts also come in, and that's a very significant part. Now, having said that, because we cannot have that uniformly, cookie-cutter approach can probably work for military barracks, not for human settlements per se. In economic terms, in environmental terms, in climate change terms, in social terms, and in consumption pattern, your relationship with the ecological footprint of human settlement. When you live in Karachi, you think water comes from tankers only. You don't know its source. You don't want to know its source. You know it only as a cost, that how much money it will cost me to get water. And the hinterland that sustains the urban life in terms of fresh produce, that has become very big, very, very big. It travels across continents. You want to have fresh kiwis on your breakfast table. It has. So therefore, the urban settlements, since they miss on those 5 elements that I mentioned, and their ecological footprint is consumption patterns are very huge and big, and therefore, especially in Pakistan-like cities, where the vertical growth is nominal, sprawl is big, and as an undeveloping city, every new generation or new settlement that's coming is coming in disaster-prone areas. And that would essentially mean more disasters of heat waves, droughts, flood, everything else that happens in the hinterland also affects urban areas in the shape of new inflow of people. And therefore, sorry, your question was difficult, and I've tried to keep my answer as silly as I can. My own sense is it's not a battle we can win by constructing something new. But I think it's a battle we can possibly think of evening up or winning by starting with social capital. New human settlements that are emerging have a very transactional relationship with each other and with the city and with the society. And that's where the crime, that's where the gang, that's where the ethnicity, all other factors become more pronounced than a cosmopolitical culture of give and take and tolerance and absence of terrorism and extremism.
So I'll come back to you because I do want to get an answer from you on the cost effectiveness, but maybe second round, and we will need to be brief now because I don't think we'll have time for 3 questions. Kamar, I want you to take your IDRC hat off. The High Commissioner is not here, so nobody will report this. I want you to put on your Pakistan hat, okay, as someone who's worked here and is of Pakistani origin. Tell us, what do you think we should be doing about research prioritization in this space? Taking the diversity of the multi-sectoral approaches that we've talked about.
Okay, so I'll try to take that hat off, but at the same time, I have to say that, IDRC is Canada's primary research funder for LMICs, so globally, right? And what has happened, there's dwindling sort of funds that are available for research in particular. And what has happened is that, more and more IDRC even has moved into a model where, we work a lot with other agencies, foundations that are promoting research or interventions for that matter. So, I mean, obviously my, my perception is informed by, the experience that I've had with them. Having said that, I think the prioritization in research, I mean, we were always like an agency that supports action research. And I think it was mentioned by Dr. Noman here that, we've moved from piloting to, other sort of areas. And for us, and I think generally speaking, that prioritization has been focused on implementation research. So that is something that, I think is being seen more and more. And that is something that we've been promoting, I mean, for at least for the last decade now. The other thing is that, I think it was also mentioned in a few talks here, is this focus on scaling. So IDRC has been, sorry, I keep bringing that up, but that's one of the things is that, scaling science is something that, we are promoting and also promoting as a field of an area. Because those are the kind of issues that, people are, facing again and again because of the, the enormity of the task that we have. One thing I would like to say is that, there was a lot of discussion on context and how context matters. One of the things that we've also, I think, I like to say that, we have promoted and we're kind of at the forefront of is looking at research quality, which is not really just the idea of, the methods and all that, but some broad parameters that research quality plus that, and approach that we've developed includes context, includes quality, which then has different, research excellence and all that, but also impact. So those are the kind of, domains within research quality plus that, people are looking at that, something that we've proudly developed. So I think those are the kind of areas that, there is a focus on and, a prioritization in terms of research. One last thing that I'll mention here is that at the moment we have 5 programs. I represent global health programming at IDRC, but all 5 programming in this current cycle of programming support has a focus on climate change, in all their respective areas, whether it's democracy and inclusive governance, sustainable inclusive economies, even health, and that has moved from, I think health kind of got that, the push through COVID, the pandemic. And, we started with preparedness aspects of, pandemics and epidemics, but that has transformed into preparedness for climate change. And I would like to mention that you've been kind of the leader, Dr. Bhutta, to kind of inform our programming through evidence and scoping work and all that. Thanks.
So thank you very much. I mean, for the benefit of the Honorable Minister, one of the things that will come across your desk over the next few months is a real proposal to create in Pakistan an opportunity for transdisciplinary research that brings various ministries together. Ministry for Education, the Higher Education Commission, Ministry of Health, and importantly, the Ministry of Climate Change, especially if you're going to look at, and agriculture, if you're looking at solutions that come across our academic centers and our centers of higher learning, creating an opportunity of a common climate change, environment, and development fund for absolutely cutting edge but important locally relevant research, I think is what is needed in Pakistan. And it cannot come from disparate domains right now. The Health Research Institute of the Ministry of Health or the Science Foundation or HEC. That fragmentation is one of the biggest challenges that we have. And I've had the opportunity of leading and making that case before. So let me now turn to the final round. We won't have a lot of time for this, so I would request succinct answers. And I'll actually start with common questions to both you, Moeed, and to Noman, because this question relates to what can our universities do to prepare a workforce to address these challenges. So kindly tell us what you can do as university leaders to promote transdisciplinary research, which brings these sectors together.
Thank you. I'll say two things. First, and this may surprise you, I think the more important part that universities can play is perhaps not in what you're referring to. That's important too. I think the most important thing is you've got 3 million, give or take, Pakistanis in universities. Can universities truly inculcate the urgency of climate change in those 3 million? I think that's the transformative thing that universities can do. I'll tell you why. Only these 3 million will have tertiary education in Pakistan. They are self-selected to be leaders. Somebody in business, somebody in agriculture, somebody in something else, somebody in politics or whatever. Some of them will go abroad, majority will remain here. Their impact on society is disproportionate. So if we can actually start having a conversation with them, not about the importance, but getting them to develop habits which are climate friendly, you'll see a transformation over 10, 15 or 20 years. So we have to get out of this mindset of tomorrow and start doing that. So I'll just give you a quick example, very simple things. At BNU, we've created something called the Climate Action Coalition. These are student bodies that are now going from university to university, starting in Lahore, and creating a bottom-up movement on how first campuses can become green. BNU is now the only WWF certified eco-smart campus. How do you replicate that in other places, and what habits do you have to change? We don't allow students to come on campus if they don't carpool. We are now moving to plastic free. All our water is drinkable off the tap. No mineral water, whether you can afford it or not, etc., etc. There are so many things that students and faculty themselves can do and then translate that for others. So we are in the process of creating a best practice manual with WWF to allow other universities to replicate it. And you made a comment earlier, Dr. Saab, that Beijing and other cities did not remove their pollution problem by some sci-fi high-tech stuff. It was basic stuff. And I think that's what we have to inculcate. So we are beginning to hear data points where students are going home and telling parents and siblings, can't do this, don't use water this way. So that's one. Where you're going with this, I think the most important thing we can do, or the most important thing we need to do, research is happening. In pockets, there are islands of excellence. How do you connect? That's where universities come in. Every university's website, I guarantee you, including AKU, you go to the website, you'll find partnership with Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, blah. Have you ever seen any website say there's a partnership between BNU and AKU, BNU and UET, AKU and, no, not interested, not cool enough. If we do this, we won't need anything from the outside. So I think the network that you are leading, I said this yesterday as well, let's at least create a university network. Somebody is doing research on climate, somebody on health, somebody on architecture. We've got a fantastic architecture school. We're building a whole building, thank you. We're building a whole building which is as close to zero carbon as it can. We want to promote, but we have no connections here. There are people coming from as far as the Netherlands to see what we're building. We haven't been able to get our own city university. So work on what you are doing and build that network. Students will take this up themselves. They don't need to be handheld. They just need platforms.
Brilliant. Naman, do you agree? Or do you have an alternative view?
Well, thank you. Yes, I absolutely agree, and I would just like to add more that when we build faculty and we build research teams, I think we should try to, in fact, induct people from other disciplines. And I just give you one example that how difficult it is. At NED, we run a program that's BS in Development Studies, and when we launched that program, I came across an extremely promising young faculty member who had a BS in nursing from this university. And when I approached my management that I want to hire this particular lady as a faculty member, he said, you can't do that because you are an engineering university and it would be a sin to hire somebody with a BS in nursing first degree. So how can you do that? Somehow I was able to go around the system and I heard that that lady, who turned out to be a real program changer, performed extremely well simply from the standpoint that she was able to challenge everything we were doing. And that is most of the faculties and departments require, that they need to be challenged for everything they do in a certain way. And that somehow cannot happen from within the system because the system is too immune, too insulated to be questioned from within. So I think that is one way. If we can make it a norm, it can have an enormous challenge. The other thing is that we also need to sensitize our regulatory bodies. I think the gods that basically regulate higher education, there are two for us in Sindh. One is the federal one, the other one is the provincial one. And the two appear to be remarkably similar in terms of their approaches. Oh, yes. I deal with them every hour, so I can tell you for sure. The only thing is that their scale continues to vary. But if this particular insight is shared with them, and possibly by using some of these success stories, so to say, that where somebody from a different discipline was able to bring about a quality change in the process of teaching it, research and capacity building, I think enormous benefit can come to the students.
I'll take you up on that, and Moeed, in the days to come. Thank you so much. Samra, how can architects help us in this? Particularly in terms of architecture for the poor. How do we reach the poorest of the poor?
Architecture, by its very makeup, is an interdisciplinary subject. And we generally encourage people from, Dr. Rahman will second me on this, we generally encourage people from all disciplines to work with us, and we are very keen to work with people of all disciplines and kind of bring them around to this. I think this is an important step that you are doing, and we're doing this with other organizations as well. We're working with NECA, which is the National Energy Efficiency Conservation Authority. And what we're doing with them is that they have this very thick handbook of energy efficient things, which it is very hard. It's like 1,000 pages to kind of let the ordinary person know what they were doing. So we are working with them to simplify their codes, to make them more accessible to people, to have smaller pamphlets. So architects, again, work with grassroots communities, as we've heard in the last 2 days, and architects have the capacity to respect indigenous knowledge. I think we can really support you on that, we can build bridges between the government. The government doesn't like architects, see. It's very hard for us to work with the government because we're very non-conventional, sir.
The government doesn't like expensive architects, I think. That's a qualifier, right?
I don't mean to say the government doesn't like us. We're just, we're very much invested in indigenous knowledge, indigenous materials, and we want to bring the change about in Pakistan using our own resources. Let's say the indigenous settlements of Karachi, Kachi Abadis we call them. If you go in there and you think that people are expecting our handouts, they're not. They basically want to do things themselves. They just need guidance or some kind of help from the government, from architects. So communities, like you said earlier, the money is not coming from anywhere. Okay, to rebuild our communities, to improve them, we have to do it ourselves. We have to use architects, doctors, all these specialists, as we've seen the last day and a half, to come together and really work with the grassroots. And we need our agencies to be less snooty, if I may use the word, to be one of the biggest problems that I have, that within our country, our academic knowledge is contained in the English language, that we are not even able to bring this knowledge to the national or the regional languages. I mean, it is so difficult for us to communicate with the very people whose lives we want to change. So we need to think about these inequalities as well, the inequalities of language, the inequalities of indigenous lifestyle. To sit on the ground and eat with your hands, and we don't respect that at times and don't understand. So,
thank you, Samra. Just for the audience, there is going to be a challenge, a climate challenge in 2026 launch on what is the best potential translation into Urdu of climate change. And don't come back with Mausmiyati Tabdili, because nobody will understand it. So we need some way of, she's absolutely right. Ali, you are not going to escape from the economics questions. I'm sorry to say, my friend. When you write on municipal bonds in the national newspaper, then you have to tell us how will they help climate change.
Yes, thank you for asking me about this. Now I can pretend to be an economist. Malak Saab, with your permission, I recently did some research with IGC, and part of it is printed already. First, what's the problem? Our municipal services have collapsed because they don't have money for anything. And the fiscal space is very limited, and the resources are transferred to the provincial capital, never get to the bottom. Now, these days, sorry, I have to, this is very fashionable in Pakistan to talk about bonds. We are launching many bonds. And I'm glad that we are able to successfully launch some. That's a Wabda 500 million. But I'm very concerned where that money is spent, because it does not add to our payability. How do we pay them back? So one proposition that I want to share with you, Malik Saab, with your permission, what if the city governments can launch their own bonds, and for the services that they can provide to the citizens, such as drinking water, sewage, waste collection, street light, whatever. And then, since it's provided, price is recovered, and that adds to your payability. So it becomes self-sustaining in that sense. Now, easy said than done, because our constitution doesn't allow. After the 18th Amendment, we have shifted the powers, but not the finances yet, so it will require some legal reform. And then legal reforms is very simple to describe, but difficult to do. We inherited the same system they did in India about the city governance. In Ahmedabad city, I talked about this morning also. In some years ago, 1994 or 5, they picked 4 economists to have accounting system for the city. It was exactly like your city of Karachi or Lahore or others. And in 2-3 years, they developed a system that was based on accrual. And in doing so, they also engaged, step 2, they engaged with the rating agency who do the rating, so your actions become very palatable, acceptable to a rating agency. 2 steps done. And third is, when you start doing your balance sheet right, within 3 or 4 years, actually within 4 years, they found that the budget can be managed by them instead of waiting for the state government or the federal government to give them money. So within 4 years, they completed the process. In 1998, they launched the first bond, 100 crore, which was at that time about 25 million, for a municipal service. And in the process, the efficiency comes in. And efficiency comes, for example, the property tax that you collect. Right now, the collection rate in Pakistan and India is comparable, about 50% there, 50% there. And now they are at 85 or something. That model was successful just because of time constraint. And in the span of next 15 years, more than 20 Indian cities have now launched bonds. for all kinds of services, some I mentioned to you, you can add your imagination to that list. So therefore, your financial deficit that you have, or constraints that you have, we have to see that how at the municipal level we can improve services, generate our own resources from the private sector and banks or what have you, and citizens pay and get the service.
Who provides the guarantee, or let's say fiscal oversight to all of this? Is there a sovereign guarantee from the federal government, or from whom?
For Pakistan-like country, initially that will probably be needed. But in their case, in many cities, like Ahmedabad I just mentioned to you, the moment you are able to balance your balance sheet and a rating agency is able to verify that the figures are credible,
right,
it becomes bankable. Then you go to any commercial bank with a bankable project, and then they'll say it's fine because the rating agency's credibility is online.
So it's like the open market. Last question to you, Kamar, and it's again related to research, and I want to specifically ask you as to what recommendation might you have for funding, financing, supporting orphan areas of research in relation to climate change. We talked about a few today.
Yeah, so before I move to that, I wanted to quickly mention what Dr. Moeed mentioned about collaboration across universities and all. I mean, we sort of do that or promote that South-South collaboration, even though we're a Canadian government agency for research. We actually prefer that this South-South collaboration. So it's not necessary that you always come to Canada and you send your as part of your projects that if you have any trainings that you send people to Canada for training only and all that. No, we do it South-South. We've taken that, we've done it forever, but we've taken it a step further, where for our main programming in climate change and health, we've developed these, or we've supported these research hubs in 5 research hubs in 5 regions that we work in. So in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Western Central Africa, in Latin America, where they have taken the lead on dispersing the funds, so issuing calls, assessing, and all that. And I know you were very, Dr. Bhutta, because Pakistan somehow was not eligible. And the reason why was it's very difficult to move funds out of the country, and that was one of the reasons why Pakistan was ineligible.
You put our center in Kuala Lumpur. I mean, so how can I be happy?
So just on the second question, again, we've been focusing on a lot of vulnerable populations, and also in the same, when we started our programming on climate change and health, one of the biggest were migration, and not just external migrations, but internal migrations from rural, urban, and from people that do not have the or the geographies that do not have within countries to more urban centers and all that. But besides that, it's the usual women are the most vulnerable in such situations. So there's a particular focus as part of the Canada's focus on gender, equity and inclusion. Those are the kind of populations that we do tend to focus on. Very quickly, I'd like to mention 2 such that we've recently funded related to climate change. So there's one in Bangladesh, and also related to the built environment and the topic of this conference. So very recently in Bangladesh, we are supporting a climate change, a heat impact on school-going children. And it's basically the built environment. So the intervention is the modification of the built environment. And then the outcomes, they're really looking at, lessening school absenteeism, better health outcomes, better educational outcomes. So that's where it's 2 or 3 disciplines which are kind of coming together to kind of look for solutions. So those kind of interventions and intervention research. Another very quick example is this migratory women migrants in the ASEAN region. So Malaysia is kind of the center because it's kind of like the economic hub. So we are funding this research, which is kind of looking at women migrants, and especially not so much those from the ASEAN region itself, because ASEAN has many regulations. But the ones who are migrating from South Asia, so Nepal, Bangladesh, they're the ones that are really left out there. So the most vulnerable migrant women, who usually are like these factory women, but also like domestic help that get exploited and all. And within that, it's not just looking at their health issues, but particularly looking at the SRH issues, because a lot of times, because of the heat and all, they do not have the areas where, there can be adaptation and all. So what, I don't know, it's like if that answers the question, but it's really kind of like that multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approaches, when particularly it comes through climate change, but looking at health outcomes there.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you'd probably agree with me. This has been a fascinating conversation. And it's a fantastic place to end our formal deliberations and pass this to the MC. Let me thank every one of the panelists, Dr. Moeed, Samra, Dr. Noman, Tokir, Ali Tokir, and Kamar, for your participation and for your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you once again to our distinguished panelists for their thoughtful and insightful contributions. And thank you, Dr. Bhutta, for moderating this high-level dialogue. Before we let our panelists leave, I would like to request Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta and Dr. Tanya Bubla to please come up on stage to help present tokens of appreciation to our panelists. Starting with Dr. Moeed Yusuf. Dr. Samra Mohsin Khan. Dr. Noman Ahmed. Dr. Ali Tokir Sheikh. Dr. Kamar Mahmood. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite the Honorable Minister to present his closing remarks for the conference.
Thank you all very much. It's been a very long while. The first 15, 20 years of my life were exclusively healthcare. And I've come back to healthcare. It almost feels like déjà vu. But it's a very welcome déjà vu. At least a lot of conversations surrounded human outcomes or humanized outcomes. So much has been said that I don't know where to begin truthfully. So I'll begin by telling you 3 stories. One night I was lying by the beach and I was looking up at the stars. And it occurred to me that from most of what we know, nearly everything that we know, most of these big rocks going around, they're all lifeless. And all of a sudden it occurred to me that the nature would not care if the world was just another stone rotating around the sun. Nature would not care, my friends. So if you would do injustice to nature, nature would retaliate. And you'd be, of the zillions, I don't know how many multiverses are out there, of all of those, you'd be just another stone rotating around somewhere in a galaxy, in one solar system around one sun. And no one would care. So we better start caring. I would tell you another meso-level story, a little bit personalized, but not about an individual. When I was growing up, I grew up in Lahore. And you know, in Lahore, and it was dense urban Lahore, we used to have a yard, and at night we would go and we'd catch fireflies. And we'd bring those fireflies into the dark rooms and we'd see them glitter. And in the evening we'd go and we'd chase butterflies, real butterflies. And every now and then when you would read a romantic novel or open a small booklet, you would see a butterfly, a dead butterfly somewhere in there, very colorful. In the morning when we'd go to school, it'd be so misty. It'd be so beautiful and so misty. And every now and then when we'd go to Islamabad, which was quite rare for Lahoris, because Lahoris are very parochial, they don't leave Lahore. You know, we'd be fascinated by these green parrots everywhere. We'd look around and not a patch that was not green. And every tree, every branch was these green parrots. And I wonder now where all of those fireflies are gone, because certainly in our much larger house, we don't have any. I wonder where those butterflies are gone. And we certainly don't have any parrots in Islamabad. I live there. So something has changed. And I wonder what that is. Well, you guys are from Karachi, so you may not associate with Lahoris, parochial Lahoris, and Islamabad kind of, you know, small town Islamabadis like myself now. So I'd give you a real story, the final one from Karachi. This was right after the floods when about a third of Sindh was drowned, completely flooded. And I was walking around Abdullah Shah Ghazi because many of the people who were displaced, they came. You know how it is around Mazars, you get food, you sleep under the bridge, etc. There were some horrible stories in those days as well about young children getting abused. But be that as it may, I was just walking around doing the political thing. And this young girl, I don't remember her name, I think it was either Aisha or Fatma, these are very common names, one of the two names. And I tried to engage her in a conversation, and all of a sudden she asked me, "Who are you?" So I told her who I was, my name. And she said, "What do you do?" And I said, I was stumped. I said, "Well, I do politics." And she said, "What is politics?" And I said, "Politics is the future." So she said, "What is future?" And I didn't know how to answer, so I looked at her and I said, "You, darling, you are the future." And then she looked at me with completely empty eyes, and my head hung in shame. This displaced girl from somewhere interior of Sindh, by Abdullah Shah Ghazi, probably living under a bridge, eating from what wealthy Karachiites would give away at the Mazar for their own, washing away of sins. And I was telling her, I had the audacity to tell her, "You are the future." Islamabad is a very silly place. It truly is. You wouldn't understand. If you've not lived there, you won't understand how inbred that city is. And it's much smaller than it looks. And when I go around and hang around with people like myself, people that I call chameleons, who speak Punjabi, who speak Urdu, who speak English, who say bonjour, comment ça va, who'd say what's up, you know, they have facility across geographies and cultures and poverty levels and socioeconomic classes. When you hang around with them, it looks like there's no place greater than Pakistan, more magnificent than Pakistan. And they would tell you about AGN Qazi, and they would tell you about Dr. Mehbubul Haq, and they would tell you about the Planning Commission, and they would tell you about someone stealing our 5-year program and becoming, I don't know, Korea or some other silly country. I have no idea. Someone became someone because they stole our 5-year program. Is every meeting that I go to, every dinner that I go to, these fancy people tell me that. And then I look around and I say, well, probably it's true. I mean, we're a nuclear power. We have a missile program. Did you see what we did to our neighbors just a few months ago? We must be cool. We must be really, really strong and good. And then I look around at every function in my own house. We have these plastic bottles from which we dispense water. So while we were building the motorways and we were building the nuclear programs and the missile programs and a lot of fancy things, and we had Nobel laureates, Dr. Abdul Salam, we have other Nobel laureates, we have great universities, it never crossed our mind that a small young kid should be able to walk up, open a tap, and drink a glass of water. It just did not cross our imagination. What crossed our imagination, we delivered. Therefore, I don't frame things as security. I frame things as rights. So whatever crossed our mind, we delivered on it. It never crossed our mind that a kid, even in the most elite parts of Karachi, should be able to drink from a tap a glass of water. It just did not cross our mind. And I go around and I see these malls and I meet these fancy people speaking fantastic language. I go to these seminars about climate, which are truly devoid of any outcome. I've just given you the climate outcomes. Over all of these 30, 40, 50 years of climate revolution, and now I lead it, you give me one outcome. Here at the university, one, I'm not asking for 5, one outcome, climate, environment-related outcome that has improved. One. Has the air burden improved? If you go to Lahore, which is now doesn't have that mist, it's filled with smog, and people tell me that 5 years of the elderly's life is shaved away because of this smog, and I remember my father dying and I holding his hand and asking God for one day. If I could get 1 day, extra day with him, and 5 years of your parents' life shaved off, or 4 years, because of smog, so much for climate. So much for all of these conferences. So much for all of these millions or billions or gazillions of dollars that we talk about are coming, and the GCF and Jeff and George and Jane. I don't know what these acronyms are. But here, tell me, show me one outcome. Has the burden on water improved? Has the solid waste burden improved? Has the emissions gone down? With all of these talks and money flowing, where's the outcome? And I can't find it. So my concern is, I don't know why. I don't know if it's a question of will, including political. I don't know if it's a question of imagination. It never crossed our imagination. I don't know if it's a question of justice. Or I don't know if it's a question of rights. But something is amiss. And I think we've all gotten together here to figure out what is amiss here and how to sort it out. I mean, I heard only the last part. I wish you had invited me over at the plenary, because I would have sat through every single session from what I've seen, what I heard. I would have liked to sit here like a fly on the wall. Because coming here, making a speech, going away, doesn't help me in any way. But if I'd been here for 2 days, I'd sat here, I'd listened to everyone, I'd heard the questions, I think I would have walked away a more informed person, and probably would have been able to make maybe one better decision. But a lot of the last conversation about, last past hour or so, hour and a half worth of conversation was a little bit more about urban. A lot about Karachi, a lot about slums, a lot about heat kind of capsules. But let me tell you something. Out of 20 most vulnerable districts in Pakistan, 17 are in Balochistan. And 2 are in what used to be FATA. And there's only 1 in Sindh, and that's not Karachi. 20 most vulnerable districts of Pakistan, because you asked me to talk about where people are, where the vulnerabilities are, where the poverty is, where the communities are. So let me tell you that out of 20 most vulnerable districts of Pakistan, 17 are in Balochistan, 2 in FATA, ex-FATA. About 10 million people live in these 20 vulnerable districts. That's the size of a small or a mid-sized country. 2 million children, 2 million women, that's about 4 million or 5 million people. I'm not talking about truly safe drinking water. Half of them don't have access to drinking water. Half of them don't have access to drinking water. So they get whatever they get from wherever they get it. 95% of people living in Jhalmaksi are living in mud huts. And about 45 to 50%, or no, 65% of the people in these 20 districts are living in makeshift tents. So they need solution too. Their heat capsules are different, their water capsules are different. So that is the level and the kind of poverty and vulnerability that we are dealing with. Two-thirds of the kid in the entire province of Balochistan, I could be off by percentages, it may be 68 and you may say it's not 2/3, or 71 and you may say it's not 2/3, but nearly 2/3 of the kids in Balochistan are not going to school, they're not enrolled. About 1/3 of the kids in Punjab and Sindh are not enrolled. 2/3 in Balochistan, 1/3 nearly everywhere else. So that is what we're dealing with, and as a consequence of that, on Human Development Index that you guys are quite familiar with, we are, I guess, about 164 out of 189 countries. And on SDGs, we are about 140 on 165 countries. But you know what Human Development Index is? It's a mother dying in the process of childbirth. It's a kid dying within the first few months of being born. It's infant mortality, it's maternal mortality, it's 5-year mortality. It's lack of enrollment rates, it's completion rates, it's net enrollment rates, gross enrollment, and I'm not even talking about the learning outcomes. This is Human Development Index for real. And you know what SDGs are? SDGs are these villages getting washed away, not having the infrastructure in place, not having life, not having livelihood, not having infrastructure, not having whatever that jargon resilience is. So this is where we're at. Now, there could be many reasons for that. And I've picked a few from you and nothing about my life is original, so don't worry, there's no original idea here. I just have learned not to give credit to people. So I hear things and then I kind of regurgitate them as if they're original. So there are some problems at the macro level, at the global geopolitical level. You know what's happening at geopolitics? Multilateralism is dying. And multilateralism is giving way to bilateralism, and in many cases, as you've recently seen with tariff wars, unilateralism is kicking in. And you know what the consequence of that is? Money is gone. And you know what has happened? Because we're very clever people. You know what we've done? We've come up with new words, such as blended finance or repurposed loans. You know what blended finance or repurposed loan is? It's loan that was previously allocated for health and education. Take that loan now and rebuild the outcomes of devastation that have come about because of climate changes. Whether it's 30 billion, 2 billion, 5 billion, 8 billion, it's anyone's guess. Over the past 4 floods that we've had, 5,000 people have died, 4,760 to be precise, died. This is documented. What all is not documented, I don't know. About 17,000 people have gotten injured or disabled because the emergency healthcare services that were needed when they got injured were not available. And 40 million people, 40, not 14, 40 million people were displaced. You know what displacement is? We've just about moved 3 million, 3.5 million people. We moved more people in the previous big flood. Half of them are kids, as you know, population premium, growing at 2.54 some percent. So these kids didn't go to school. Take 2 million kids and multiply them with 60 days or 90 days. That's 180 million days of school lost. That's the kind of vulnerability that we're dealing with at the grassroots level. And yet, when we reach out, everyone wants a cap on mitigation, which we are supportive of it. We've just filed NDC 3. But when we talk about financing, they begin to talk about repurposed loans, which means even lesser health and even lesser education and even lesser sanitation and wash and so on and so forth. And as you mentioned, we are not creating these emissions. Our emission is 0.7%, 0.8%. It goes up and down every now and then. That's where we're emitting less than 1% and significantly less than 1%. 2 countries at our border are producing 40% of the world's carbon dioxide. 2 countries. 7 countries to 10 countries of the world are producing 70 to 75% of carbon dioxide. 10 countries, and the same 10 countries are taking 85% of the green financing of the world. Same 10 countries. You remember the game Pac-Man? You remember Pac-Man? I mean, you're too young for that. Some of the people in the front rows probably remember Pac-Man. Pac-Man was this little frog-like thing that ate things. So those 10 countries that are eating like a Pac-Man, the environment or the climate or whatever you call it, are the same 10 countries that are rewarding themselves. Look at the hypocrisy of the world. And yet Brutus is an honorable man. So we are not contributing, we're suffering. But those who are consuming and destroying are the ones who are rewarding themselves with green financing. And when they look at us, they say, hey, how about repurposed loans? So this is the global hypocrisy. Let's talk about ours. What do we, in our fiscal space, what do we do in terms of our award that we give to provinces? And provinces have some money. They return, what is it called? Maybe one of my friends would help. The money that is not spent at the end of the year. Surplus. They have surplus. But you know, the money that we give to the provinces is given on the basis of population, and therefore what you get is population. You reward population, you get population. If you rewarded poverty, you would get prosperity. But rather than basically rewarding disenfranchisement or rewarding poverty, we reward population. Therefore, what we end up with, or what we have ended up with, is population. That's the second thing that we need to discuss. In terms of the yearly, fiscal space, we collect about 16 trillion rupees a year. About 8.4, 8.2 trillion goes in debt servicing, and they want us to repurpose the debt or take more debt. Out of 16 trillion total, 8.5 goes to provinces and 8.5 goes into debt servicing, and everyone is telling us to take more debt. 8 and 8, 16 and 117. We collect 16 just between debt servicing and what we give out to the provinces, we have 17. So this is basically the reality of the fiscal space that we have. Within the provinces, first I gave you the federal allocation. Now within the provinces that have some surplus, as you were mentioning about the bonds, after surplus we should go for the bonds, but there are no local bodies. Bonds, who's going to issue the bond? So the politics within provinces doesn't allow for empowerment at the local level where people live, where healthcare solutions have to come to the fore, where the sanitation solutions have to come to the fore. So that's basically the third level of problem. But it's not that complicated. If you went around and asked in this room, and you went to Liari and you asked anyone, or you went to Tandu Adam and asked anyone, they would tell you very simple, and that's the answer that the Prime Minister gives me. When I asked him, what do you want? He said, decent life. Can't you get it? All I want is a decent life for people. That's it. So you guys go, all the ministers, and figure out what is fiscal and what is surplus and what is inflation rate and what is prime and what is REIR. All I want is a decent life for people. And how complicated can it be that a family, a household, a young man and woman who are married can take care of their elderly at a facility, healthcare, can send their kids to school, and have enough to eat and don't have to worry that if the rain comes, urban flooding would wash away everything that they have? How complicated can it be? It's not missile technology. It's not physics. It's just imagining that one unit household and walking it backwards. A household with 5 or 6 people, 2 grandparents who are well taken care of in terms of healthcare, a bunch of 2 kids or 2.7 kids or however many kids there are going to a decent school, and both parents employed gainfully somewhere, getting decent livelihood. How complicated can this be in an infrastructure which is decent, which is integrity, which doesn't get washed away? So that's all. That's our dream. That's what we want. And when we talk about, since you've held this conference a little bit more about climate, I mean urban climate. How about urban forests? How about zoning? How about making sure that the city doesn't get flooded? How about having a decent drainage system? How about not having encroachment and just cleaning up the nalas that are not clean? How about having some sensible mechanism, housing, zoning mechanism, where reasonably decent kind of localities can be built, whether they go vertical or horizontal? So that's not terribly, for me, complicated. I can get into the fancy stuff of sponge cities and all of that kind of stuff as well, but I think the more local, true, real problems that ought to be sorted out. How about a decent public transportation system? How about just investing with your industrial footprint to make sure that they don't poison the waters that we have? Some of the places in Lahore, Ravi River, it's not even fit for agriculture, the water. I'm not talking about human use, agriculture. It's not fit for agriculture. How about just in the urban areas, taking care of water, of basically whatever garbage is flowing into our water streams, about good, decent public transportation systems so that emissions go down, electrification, et cetera, we have strategies for that, but that's what it is. How about building a social infrastructure? We're spending 0.8% on health, by 0.8% on education, some numbers like that. All in all, about 2% or something like that. How about increasing that? Not as a matter of security, as a matter of rights, as a matter of justice. So we do that, and we start to build up that dream of a decent living for our family. And we have GLOFs, and you all know that, the only thing that stands in the way of water coming gushing down from the mountains is a forest. So how about afforestation? Torrential, the slopes that you have, the stabilizing of slopes is growing, basically just creating layering, and then growing forests there and doing agriculture there. And that's a natural kind of resilience to the water gushing down. How about that? How complicated is that? How many billions do we need for that? Same goes for these torrential rains, forests. Same goes for the coastal kind of, the one that you face, the coastal flooding. These mangroves, they're natural barriers. They're nature's barriers to all of these tufans or whatever you want to call it. So I would say whether it's monsoon or urban flooding or torrential flooding or GLOFs, this kind of solutions are elegant and not very expensive. Some are expensive. Most of them are not very expensive. So what are we doing about it? In the short run, we've already created a strategy about everything. About water recharge, about slope stabilizations, about forestation, and so on and so forth. We've just been hit with a flood. A lot of devastation has taken place. We have already created and presented a strategy to the Prime Minister where we're going to, in phase 1, which is going to be 300 days, we're simply going to fix what is broken, what was broken and washed away by this flood. That's our first phase. In phase 2, which is 1 to 3 years, whatever we have, we're going to expand it. We're going to fix it. So if the drainage system of a particular city is not good enough for the kind of monsoon that we get now, we have 3 years to fix it and expand it and make it larger. Similarly, the dams, the small dams that are already under construction in areas where we get torrential rainfall, mostly in Balochistan and in southern Punjab and some of the other areas, build those, finish those dams. And in the long run, which is 3 to 5 years, we're building new infrastructure. I don't want to bore you with that infrastructure because you've been talking about it for the past 2 days. Whether it's embankments or levees or the barrages and so on and so forth, whatever is needed to build a robust infrastructure, we're going to do that. So our phase 1 is fix what is broken, what was just washed away. Phase 2 is to expand what you have, and phase 3 is build new. That gives us 5 years to build new. That's our strategy. In terms of our allocations, we've divided our world into two kinds of projects. Projects where the public rate of returns are very high. We're trying to build capacity within the ministry to write world-class proposals. And Professor Saab, we need your help. Because we cannot build that capacity. Because as you said, all of this is multi-sectoral. So no one ministry of 50 officers or 30 officers can build that capability in-house to write those integrated world-class 97th percentile proposals, whether we get money or not. We should have the confidence that we did our best. Our proposals were the best across the world that we put forth. And we need your help. We're begging for help. But areas where the private rate of returns are high, we've already begun the process of doing what is affectionately called Shark Tank. We believe people my age should wash away. I think future is with these young people sitting here. People who are in their 20s and 30s, who are starry-eyed, who are not cynical like me, who still believe that the world can be changed. And we need to give them the opportunity, people from LUMS, from Aga Khan University, from Jamshoro University, who have ideas, who have technologies. I did my PhD in 1995. That was a different century. That was a different century, guys. How can I solve problems? But these young people who are coming out of Ivy League schools and Ivy League equivalent schools in Pakistan, who know new value chains and new business models and new technologies and new solutions, the new battery solutions, the new material sciences solutions. What we're trying to do now is have competition, business plan competition, 20x, 10x competition. We've already held one. We took 2 companies to Sevilla, and I understand they're both in the final rounds they've negotiated their capital. And what we want to do is have these competitions every quarter where we invite all of these people from all of the universities of Pakistan who have brilliant ideas and say, hey, come on, bring it on. Tell us what your idea is. And some rich man here, whether it be HBL or it be private sector organization, a bank, someone would fund you. Our job is to bring you into the room, have that competition, and we're not asking for money, we're asking for people to be present there and say, $100,000 for 20% of your idea. We've already begun to do that. That's our strategy. That's our strategy for the private sector. Where the private rate of returns are high, this is what the government of Pakistan is going to do. Where the public sector returns are high, we would need help from you to write those world-class proposals. And wherever there is a viability gap, which means you come up with a great idea, but the returns are 12% and the investors want 16%, we'll use the carbon credits. So carbon credits is our viability gap strategy. So I've given you short, medium, long-term strategy overall. I've also given you the strategy for where the public rate of returns are high and where the private rate of returns are high. And this is what we are setting out to do within this year. And that is our strategy of moving forward. So in terms of infrastructure, we'd build water infrastructure, we'd build power infrastructure, we'd build transport infrastructure. I've told you fix, grow, and build kind of stuff. Social, we've already spoken about. Protection is important. In a country with the level of poverty that we have, protection is important. We already have a program, this program. I think an element of conditional, transitional kind of element is also equally important, if not more important, so we should focus on that. And I think the provinces should also participate in that because after the 18th Amendment, most of these responsibilities are actually provincial. That doesn't, we are not shying away. The federal government is not shying away from it. We've increased it to, our total PSDP is less than $1 trillion, less than 1,000 billion. We don't end up spending it. We end up spending 700, 800. And our BIS program alone is 650 billion. And then some of the fiscal reforms that I shared with you. I mean, my wife tells me I have an alligator syndrome. You know what that is? What alligator syndrome is? Big mouth, no ears. So you give me the podium, I continue to speak. You know, I was once at a conference and I said, I'm at the podium, my job is to speak. You're sitting there, your job is to listen. Too bad. But if you get done with your job before I get done with mine, please let me know. And when I look at the haze in the eyes of these young people, it seems like they're done listening, while I'm not done speaking. So I'll extend them the courtesy, and I would only say, our journey is devastation to dignity. And I hope to God, next time I come here, the report or the publication that we put on the screen is that of hope. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. May I now invite Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta and Dr. Bubla to please come forward on stage to present a token of appreciation to the Minister. Thank you, Dr. Bhutta. Thank you, Dr. Bubla. And thank you once again, Honorable Minister, for your valuable time and meaningful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, to formally conclude today's proceedings, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Khatija Vatsaria, a senior instructor at the Institute of Global Health and Development, Aga Khan University. Dr. Vatsaria is a public health researcher with expertise in maternal health and nutrition, epidemiology, and digital health innovations. She has led and contributed to multiple national and international research projects, including WHO-funded studies. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Vatsaria for the vote of thanks.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency, AKU leadership, respected speakers, colleagues, partners, and friends. As we draw the curtains on this inspiring two-day conference, it is my honor to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the Institute for Global Health and Development and the Sustainable Development Solution Network, Pakistan. These past 2 days have been exceptional, rich with thoughtful conversations, evidence-based insights. This success is the result of the hard work, commitment, and collective spirit of everyone in this room. Together, we have examined challenges, shared solutions, and strengthened our understanding of how our built environments can protect rather than endanger the communities we serve. So for your time, your expertise, and your engagement, I offer my sincere appreciation to each one of you. We are honored to thank our chief guest for today, Dr. Musaddiq Malik, Federal Minister of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. Thank you for gracing us with your presence today and for sharing your important vision for the Pakistan's climate agenda. Your leadership and commitment inspired our researchers, practitioners, architects, urban planners, and youth working towards a more resilient future. We also extend our profound gratitude to His Excellency Tariq Khan, High Commissioner of Canada to Pakistan, who was the chief guest for the inaugural day. His presence and thoughtful reflections and Canada's steadfast partnership in advancing climate resilience and sustainable development in Pakistan have greatly enriched this conference. We are deeply grateful for his continued support. Our deep appreciation to the Federal Minister, Professor Ehsan Iqbal, who joined us virtually yesterday despite of his demanding schedule and highlighted the critical link between development planning and climate-smart design. His leadership for sure sets the direction for building a resilient Pakistan. We extend heartfelt thanks to the leadership of the Aga Khan University for their guidance and constant support, Dr. Suleiman Shahabuddin, President, Aga Khan University, Dr. Tanya Bubla, Provost and Vice President Academic, Dr. Kareem Damji, Dean, Medical College, Aga Khan University. Thank you for your commitment to advancing climate research, evidence-based policy, and academic collaboration, and immensely supporting IGHD in all its initiatives. Our sincere gratitude to all our keynote speakers who set the intellectual foundation of this conference, Professor Sajda Haider, Mr. Christopher and Mr. Joseph, and Dr. Zara Hussain. Your vast experience and insights on traditional architecture, climate-smart design, and community-led conservation expanded our understanding of what resilient environment can and should look like. Today's session brought together an exceptional group of experts across disciplines. We extend appreciation to all the speakers and panelists who contributed with evidence, innovations, field experiences, and critical reflections. From urban planning and decarbonization to indigenous and traditional wisdom, to health systems, data science, and rural community innovations, to solutions emerging from Karachi, rural Sindh, Malaysia, and global case studies. Your contributions strengthen the dialogue and move the conversation from awareness to actionable solutions. We thank all the session chairs for sharing rich discussions with clarity and purpose. We also express thanks to our international colleagues who joined in person or through the video messages. Their perspectives enriched the global context and reminded us that the climate resilience is a shared responsibility. A special note of thanks to Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta for presenting the key recommendations from the symposium and leading the closing panel with great depth and foresight. We are equally grateful to all panelists, policymakers, climate experts, architects, researchers, and legal scholars for articulating clear pathways for Pakistan's next step. It is equally important to recognize the dedicated team who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event possible. Our heartfelt appreciation to the team of IGHD, and a special shout out to Mr. Abbas Jafar, Mr. Akbar Ali, Mr. Mutiur Rahman, Mr. Mohammad Siddiq, Mr. Barakat Ali, and Mr. Safan. Their tireless efforts over the months have ensured that every session was purposeful, inclusive, and well coordinated. This conference would not have been possible without the efforts and support of the conference secretariat, including Mr. Haroon, Ms. Amna, Mr. Manzoor, and Mr. Salim. Also, from the engineering department, Mr. Syed Jan, and not forgetting the IT department, audiovisual department, public affairs, security, housekeeping, NFSD, and student supporters. Thank you for the months of preparation, the long hours, the attention to detail, and the commitment to excellence that brought this event to life. And to our audience, including all the researchers, practitioners, architects, students, policy experts, and community partners, thank you for joining us, contributing your insights, and engaging with enthusiasm across both days. Your presence and participation, both physical and virtual, what truly makes a conference meaningful. So today's discussion have shown that climate change is not a future threat. It is a present reality shaping health, livelihoods, and equity. So let us leave today with a renewed sense of urgency and hope, grounded in evidence, community wisdom, and the belief that sustainable futures are not only possible, but within reach. So thank you all once again for being part of this important gathering. We look forward to continuing this journey together next year. Shukriya. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the IGHD Annual Conference 2025. On behalf of the organizers, we extend our deepest gratitude to our speakers, chairs, panelists, attendees, partners, and guests for your contribution and presence. You are now warmly invited to join us for high tea, served outside the auditorium. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.